Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 918 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again, as Belarus gets a little flip-flopping, kind of like Turkey likes to do. And also, Russia is continuing to get smashed even into today. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, as we have gotten breaking news that the Russian Federation is apparently having an incredibly hard time containing the Ukrainians inside of Kursk, and appear to be completely fruitless in their efforts as the Ukrainian armed forces continue to hold their ground and continues to try and take every opportunity to gain a little bit of extra ground within the Kursk Oblast. The situation is, of course, incredibly difficult, and the Russian Federation has been trying to find a way to alleviate the pressure or to completely implode this offensive about as quickly as it began, by trying to recruit the Belarusians into joining the war in Ukraine and beginning an offensive into the northern area of Ukraine, near to the city of Kyiv and Chernihiv in tandem. That apparently has fallen through today, as the Belarusians have now officially backed out and have stated that they will never conduct offensive action into Ukraine. Their military will exclusively be used, and I quote, as a defensive force in the defense of Belarusian sovereignty. Period. There is no room at this point, according to the statements that were made today, to be able to assume that the Belarusians are going to be conducting a ground invasion into northern Ukraine with their armed forces, from what we understand at this very moment. That is incredibly big news, and we will be getting into the implications of that very soon. But at the same time, we were able to see a whole bunch of other interesting things going on as well. For example, we got to see another Russian oil depot was hit today, somewhere within the Don area of the Russian Federation, direction. We were also able to hear big news that apparently the fire is so big near to the area of Kamysh-Shetinsky that the actual power grid has shut off because the fire has apparently started to affect local energy infrastructure, which is a pretty big deal from what we can tell. Not only that, but we've also been getting some very interesting news from Ukraine, from the battlefields of Kursk, where we've seen that Ukrainian forces have continued to inflict very high casualties on the Russian forces, and all the way up into the area around Vovchansk, where we were also able to get some very interesting firefight footage as well within this direction. However, some unfortunate news was heard today, as we did hear that apparently on Monday, a Ukrainian F-16 crashed in an unknown area of the country, but apparently the pilot that was flying the aircraft was killed, and according to the initial statements, the incident was attributed to pilot error. We'll be talking about that a little bit more later tonight, but we still have massive amounts of information to cover from just the past 24 hours alone. And so moving on into probably the biggest single piece of news that we have today, we have been able to see that the Ukrainians are not being contained still within the Kursk region, and things are not going well. But before we get into the serious analysis of the clips and the information that we got from this area, I do have to show y'all a billboard from the Akhmat that was in the Kursk Oblast that I can only say was prophetic at this point in this area. And so we're going to be moving on into this. This is a billboard that has the commander of the Akhmat in the Kursk Oblast on it, and it very interestingly has a quote on it, Matthew. And who do you think this quote is by?
It's by the Akhmat commander, or it's by Putin, one or the other.
It's by Sun Tzu.
Oh no! Oh no!
And the quote,
I see where this is going.
And the quote reads as follows: "The best way to fight a war is to not fight one at all." Now that's an interesting...
Well, that's a damn good quote. This is a damn good billboard right here. I'm telling you what.
Dude, this guy is the guy who made sure that the Akhmat followed that to a T, man. He sat there, when the Ukrainians started across the border, he said, "Blyet, what would Sun Tzu do?" And he thought, the best way to fight the war is to not fight one at all. Okay, everyone, in the trucks, we're leaving, we're going for lunch. And then they immediately
I'll
left.
have to listen to Sun Tzu more often at this point. That's the quotes you're getting out of the book. Just go ahead and read the whole thing and just do your war strategy based on Sun Tzu. It's a pretty good strategy if you ask me.
Oh my lord, man. It's the best one. And also, we can see down here at the bottom, just to make sure that y'all know this is an Akhmat billboard, it says "Glory to Akhmat" right here, something along those lines. Because it says Akhmat, Sila, something like that, Rossiya, Moshu, and then some other stuff. But beyond that, this is a very interesting kind of an inspirational quote and a billboard to have in the Kursk Oblast, considering that these guys are the reason why this offensive is even going on, is because as soon as the first shots were fired, these guys went out for lunch. So I gotta say, big credit to these guys. Big credit to them, because they really followed this statement to the letter. Like, you couldn't get any better than what they followed from this. But anyways, moving on from that, considering that the Akhmat still seems to be believing in that a great deal, it doesn't seem like the Russians are really boding all too well with this, and they are trying to find ways to further protect and insulate themselves from Ukrainian drone attacks in this area any way that they can find. They even ended up pizzazzing Azaz with the cope cage recently to try and make sure that it was better protected.
Man, I think the cope cage is probably more valuable than the car, really, because that car looks like it belongs in a junk pile or a heap.
Man, this car looks like when you turn the engine on, like the engine goes, "Kill me," or something like that. It's like, this is bad. This is a really bad off car. And for some reason, they're going to put a cope cage on it. Like, that's going to help. It's like, I have a feeling that the bigger danger you have from anything blowing up will probably be the car engine more so than a drone slamming into the cope cage above it. This is pretty rough off. But while that is pretty rough off, the reality is that the actual strategic situation in Kursk is very rough for the Russians in this area. We were able to see that on the E-38 today, a decent amount of Russian vehicles were ending up getting hit pretty hard by some FPV drones. We understand that this was a civilian vehicle that was requisitioned for military use. It ended up getting hit by an FPV drone and completely destroyed. As of about 36 to 48 hours ago, all civilian traffic has been banned on the E-38 motorway, and the only only traffic that is permitted at this point is military traffic. For this reason, any vehicle moving down this road will be considered by the Ukrainian military a enemy target and will be attacked and destroyed. And there's fairly good reason for us to understand and believe that there are only military targets on this highway and that this was a civilian vehicle requisitioned as a military transport. This is going to make things very difficult for the Russians. The entirety of the E-38, along pretty much its entire breadth from Kurchatov to Rilisk, is within Ukrainian drone striking distance, which is a very important thing because the Ukrainians can use this to pretty much completely deny access to Russian reinforcements and logistical movements up and down the E-38, ensuring that the Russians, as far as their situation on the far western flank near Rilisk, will probably be a lot tougher off. And not only that, the defense of Korenivo will probably be harder to coordinate and a lot less effective in the long run because of a lack of munitions and supplies, and not only that, a lack of available manpower that can be quickly brought down from Kursk through the E-38. The Ukrainians will have to ensure that the Russians find another way around, and we'll probably see that they end up having to take the long way around from Kursk all the way over to Rilisk, which will greatly increase the length of the supply route, making the strain a lot greater, especially in heavier fighting moments on the battlefield. And not only that, it'll make it a lot more difficult for reinforcements to arrive at quick paces that will keep up with the needs of the battlefield here in this western flank. So the heavy attacks and the closure of this highway is a very important thing logistically for the Ukrainians and putting the Russians in a very bad spot. If the Russians were smart, the first thing that they would try and do is push the Ukrainians back from Kromsky-Byky and the surrounding areas and back towards the area of Malaya Lukhnia, where we believe that some Russians are still encircled at this point. By doing this, they would ensure that Ukrainian drones would be almost at their maximum range trying to reach the highway, or may not even have the range to reach it at that point. However, that would not mitigate the situation around Korenivo, as they still would be within drone striking distance in this part of the road, but at least that would greatly decrease the Ukrainian catchment area over the entirety of the highway and ensure that Russian supplies and reinforcements are not at risk of being destroyed along the entire length of the highway. It's just a small stretch of it heading into the town of Rilisk, which is the major staging area within the western flank. But we will probably see that the Russians never get to accomplish this. From what we understand, the central area of the front line is still a fairly weak area. While it does seem like the Russians have stabilized this area and the Ukrainians aren't advancing any further at the moment, it also isn't an area that is incredibly well stabilized, as in prior times we saw that this area was so devoid of Russian forces, the Ukrainians drove all the way up to Lvov and stole a road sign that said the city of Lvov on it right from the very edge of the city. So going off of that, we know that this area is still probably weakly reinforced, probably still one of the weakest flanks in the offensive so far. So the Russians will not be able to push the Ukrainians back and stop the entirety from the E-38 being threatened. The E-38 will still be threatened well on into the future, and that will probably never change, at least through the entirety of this conflict. Moving on from that, and on into the area of Kremenyo, we were also able to see that the Ukrainians ended up having to get through a firefight today and try and evacuate a wounded soldier. Now, I want everyone to know this. For some reason, I feel like we've seen this clip before, for some odd reason, but still it seemed fresh and new enough that I was like, I'm not really sure if this is something that we've seen before or not, so let me know in the comments if we have, and if we have, we'll skip beyond this and move on into our next clip.
Ду, ты бачиш? БК є? Що там таке?
I think we have seen those, because I think this is the scrub brush video that we saw yesterday that made me think about the snakes.
Yeah, I think this is an old clip. So we're going to be getting rid of that one. And now we're going to be moving on down into the area of Bolshoi Soldatskoy, where we did get to see a new clip, and I'm fairly certain this is brand new, from the 225th, hitting some Russian forces within this area that were apparently attempting to stage and prepare some sort of a counterattack against the Ukrainians in this direction. We can see them hitting these Russians pretty prolifically with a large amount of bomblets. The Russians are now running around the buildings, frantically trying to make their way out and to escape the roaring flames that are now about to eat up all of the other buildings. We can see them continuing to wander around. Also, what kind of a oh my goodness, what kind of a building is that down there on the other side of the street? Dude, they built the Great Wall of Russia on the other side of that street. It's like the longest building I've ever seen.
It looks like horse stables or something. Why is there like garage doors on like a huge section of the building?
Dude, I think this was the trap house or something. I don't know what this is, though, because I have no clue, dude, because it's as long as an entire street. That's got to be like one of the longest buildings in the world. Anyways, we can see them continuing to hit more buildings on the other side of the street where there are normal buildings, not freakishly long ones that look like a wall. Terrence Custer said motel. It must be the Roach Motel. But we can see the buildings continuing to burn on down. And that's the end of the clip. But it does seem as though they were effective in knocking out that small Russian contingent and ensuring that they will not be able to advance any farther. Meanwhile, near the Sudza area, we also got to get a very interesting interview with a Stryker crew that is a part of the 82nd Air Mobile or Air Assault Brigade, which has been involved in this offensive since day one, and also is the unit that uses the venerable Challenger 2s. But here's the clip. I'm also got to say this really quickly. I hope that this is not copyrighted because for some reason, interestingly enough, people use a lot of music these days without ensuring that they have the copyright to it. So we may end up getting content ID'd for this, but there is some pretty decent audio of the people talking in here that we have to let y'all hear. So we're going to let it play regardless and just hope that there is no like content ID that happens with this later.
Когда десант настроен, допустим, їхати з екіпажем, да, і він бачить, що екіпаж, тобто хлопці не перший день, допустим, за рулем такої бойової машини, то вони не відказуються, ми сідаємо і їдемо, все. Тобто, є такі, да, які я не хочу, я боюся, там, як командир каже, тебе тут ніхто не держить. Бери жовтий пакет і підеш додому.
We're going to be muting that for a second, but we can see the Strykers in action here, some of the clips of them in the Kursk offensive.
Кераміка йде, защита, плити йдуть. Тобто видержує 7,62 видержує набої, 5,45, ну це таке царапинки там. Да, таке як уже РПГ, іде либо ПТУР, тобто це вже, да, вже пробиває машину, машина горить. Це не ті, допустим, як БТР-80, да, там, які прошиваються з автомата.
Penetrated,
да, тут, коли сиділи в підбитій машині, то ти чуєш, як воно тільки звенить по броні і все. Тобто дзенькає. А так, ну...
You know what's interesting? I just gotta say this kind of is like an overall thing with the war, is that one interesting thing that the Ukrainians always talk about is that the BMPs and the BTRs, which are some of the main armored personnel carriers and modern infantry fighting vehicles of the Russian army and the Ukrainian army, have armor that is just weak enough that it can be pierced by normal rifle fire from like a 7.62 or something along those lines. However, every single one of them is noted that with the Bradley, the Stryker, not the M113 though, that's a bit of a different story, but with the Stryker and the Bradley, they do not get penetrated by normal conventional rifle rounds like 7.62 by 39 or anything along those lines. And the thing is that at least in terms of the armor difference in between a Stryker and, say, a BTR, it's actually not that big of a difference. I mean, we're not talking that this thing has main battle tank levels of armor where it's multiple spaced levels of ceramic armor and different kinds of depleted uranium and all that stuff. This thing has none of that. It is just slightly thicker steel armor or composite armor in some areas that is able to protect this vehicle from all of this incoming fire, and that's the only difference. That is the small difference that saves so many lives. It's just a slight thickening of the armor in between the Russian APCs and American APCs and infantry fighting vehicles. Pretty big difference, really. It's a very small one, but actually makes a very big impact on how these vehicles perform.
Багато чого вона допомагає. Якщо виведуть зі строю, так сказати, водія, ляже весь екіпаж машини і вся піхота, яка буде в машині. Да? От у нас вийшло, що нас підбили, да? У нас всі живі. Да, є 300, але у нас всі живі. Тобто основна маса людей, яка їхала в машині, всі живі. Ми сюди приїхали, тобто, і потім вже осознаєш, що ти зробив. Тобто, і ти, як сказати, доволі великий вклад зробив в це. Тобто, ти заїхав туди, куди, допустим, другі бояться, да, заїжджати. Ти
Wow, a whole
виконав свою
tire
бойову
ripped off
задачу.
that hub right there.
Man, I'm telling you, man, it's crazy.
Може не до кінця, да? Не до кінця чого, тому що підбита машина була. Тобто я знаю, що зараз те село вже наші хлопці взяли, тобто, куди я їхав з командиром. Тобто, у нас не вийшло, тому що от така ситуація. Ну, командир стане на ноги, ми підлічимося і опять вперед. Я вважаю, що ми не робимо такого, як вони у нас дозволяли собі той же Бучі, да, там, в Ірпені там, робити. Тобто ми не дозволяли там розстрілювати всіх там, і тому подобне. Ми чисто з військовими працюємо і все. Тобто тепер почувствуй, подивись, як в тебе хата горить там, і тому подобне.
Chad-like, amazing, and it seems as though, once again, the Ukrainians do prefer the American-made armored personnel carriers, tanks, and such things because they are just simply better. I mean, there's really no other way to go about it. I mean, it's not like I'm just saying something biased. If you really go down and look at all the nitty-gritty details, American and Western MBTs and APCs are simply better than their Russian counterparts. Nothing new there, but it is great to see that actual battlefield experience brings everyone to that same conclusion over and over again. But moving on.
The only trouble is once you go American and you get all this American equipment and stuff, it's really hard to go back from that, which is a sad thing because Ukraine still will have to rely on their usual equipment. But you know, once you go American, you can't go back, man. It's just perfect equipment. It's perfect.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, it is perfect. It's some of the best. You can't settle for less after you have American equipment. There's literally just nothing like it out there. Well, actually, I would say there are some things out there like it, like the Warrior IFV from the UK, although we haven't seen them send any of those to Ukraine. The Challenger 2 is really good. The Leopard 2s are really good. The Martyr's pretty all right. But the Puma is kind of the equivalent to the Bradley that they have in Germany, but Ukraine's not gotten any of those either. France has some pretty interesting, well, not really. And also we haven't seen any AMX 10s, or at least the AMX 10Ps, which are the APC version, show up in Ukraine yet. So really America is the only one to provide these kinds of heavier armored infantry fighting vehicles in wheeled APCs. So pretty nice to see that everyone's loving them and really appreciating them because it's just the best. It really is. Speaking of which, speaking of the best, we have seen the best encirclement still going on south of the Reka Sem, where that entire brigade is pretty much stuck down here. We have heard that once again today. They are not retreating or evacuating from this area, but we have not seen any fast Ukrainian movements taking control of this area yet. So this area is in a pretty precarious position, but the advances are not happening rapidly either. However, the situation is really tough, and it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to realize that it is incredibly tough. We have been believing that over the past few days, the Belarusians may be building up their forces onto the Gomel area border to be able to conduct an offensive into northern Ukraine, drawing a large amount of Ukrainian strategic reserves, including a large amount of the combat forces that may be within Suja at the moment, out of the area and into northern Ukraine to try and defend in this direction. That would greatly help out the Russians if that was the case, and a lot of people were saying that that was probably going to be the reality and that Belarus was going to invade. On this channel, Matthew was pretty sure that they weren't and they were just master yappers, and I was fairly certain that it could be one or the other. It was kind of a 50-50 split on what could happen, but I also was leaning more towards this may actually happen. So on this instance, Matthew actually ended up being right because it appears, at least as of today, and the situation could change tomorrow, but off the situation we're seeing today, Lukashenko has made this statement. There were no orders to go fight outside Belarus, and there will be none. We will only fight when they come to us with bad intentions. That's it. That's all he said today, and this is a very important statement. And the important reason that this is an important statement, while I try and figure out where the hell I was going with this just a second ago, is that
I'll tell you this real quick, Enforcer, that the whole situation here with this, it sounds vaguely reminiscent of what Putin said when Putin went into Ukraine. He said it was defensive operations. He was defending Russia against the West, which was encroaching on his territory and stuff like that. I wouldn't personally take this statement by Lukashenko to mean that he's not necessarily going to invade Ukraine, because this sounds like the same line of reasoning that Putin put forward a while back. So To me, this means nothing to me. And Lukashenko lies a lot as well. So he's just like Putin on that aspect with the lying. So I would say, to me, this probably doesn't change anything. But do you think it changes something, or do you think it's pretty much status quo?
I would say that it does change something, because when statements like these are made, they're not just heard by an international audience, they're heard by a domestic audience inside of Belarus as well. And that entire audience, including the armed forces, just heard in public forum today, we're not going to be doing anything. And we do have to remember that the situation in Belarus is very different than the one in Russia. Putin has absolute control in Russia, and the entire government is made up of yes men, and it has been that way for some time. And Putin's been very clear in making sure to weed out any non-yes men and throw them out and replace them with ones that will do what he wishes. Belarus is a very different story, because while Lukashenko is a dictator in Belarus, he has not really had the time nor the experience to be able to uproot these commanders that are not yes men and have them replaced. And so from what we understand, inside of Belarus, the entire military command is made up of no yes men. They're all no men, and they all largely flat out refuse things that Lukashenko says, like we're going to invade Ukraine, which was supposed to happen at the beginning of the war, and it never did. And we believe it never happened because the military commanders said that they would not, and if Lukashenko tried to order them anyways, they were just going to overthrow him and get him done with. So I don't really think that they were ever going to really invade northern Ukraine at this point, seeing what we're seeing, because this statement today is showing that once again he may be running into that same kind of a problem that they had at the beginning of the war, and it's either Belarus stays Russian aligned but out of the war, or Belarus tries to get involved in the war, the military overthrows Lukashenko, and then Russia loses a Russian aligned Belarus, and it probably may end up going Western in the end, which would be an even larger death knell to the Russians' strategic interests within Eastern Europe. So it may be the real case that Belarus will not be getting involved in the war, and that they clearly are saying that the only thing they could do are defensive actions. Otherwise, they could get themselves into a pretty big pickle, not getting involved in the war in Ukraine and getting bogged down by the Ukrainians, but having the military overthrow Lukashenko, which would be a far worse outcome than anything else that is happening right now in the war for Russia strategically. But a lot of people have been weighing in on this, and a lot of people have been having many different thoughts than I am right now. And it looks like, Matthew, a lot of people are actually saying that Putin calls the shots, and this statement by Lukashenko is a flat-out lie. But what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so now that we've heard the statement like we just went over a minute ago, Lukashenko claims there are no orders to invade Ukraine, but Belarus will respond defensively if needed. So what are your thoughts about the entire situation? 48% said it's a lie and Putin does call the shots, while 30% said it's true, Belarus won't invade Ukraine, and 12% said it sounds like a prelude to war. And on this one, I'd have to say I'm definitely with the 48%. I think it is a lie. Lukashenko has many reasons to lie, and of course, Putin does call the shots. Belarus has been a longtime lapdog state of Russia, and it still is to this day. So the fact that Lukashenko says something, to me, is pretty much meaningless because he's not the one in the driver's seat. It's actually Putin. So also, once again, like I mentioned before, defensively and offensively in the Russian mind and also the Belarusian mind, they're completely different than what we're familiar with. Defensively in their minds means going in and attacking people and invading other people's countries. That's what they think is defensive. But in our minds, that's offensive. So, they have a whole different way of trying to frame the situation, which doesn't correspond with reality. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would actually have to be leaning, and I could be wrong, we'll see, but Belarus probably will not invade. They've had ample opportunity for about 2 years now, because the Ukrainian northern border has largely been depopulated of troops on both sides for about 2 years to build up a force and start invading Ukraine anytime they wanted to. That was really the reality, and yet they never did. And it probably is because of the internal factors we keep on bringing up, and the ones that are rumored to have made sure that Belarus never got involved in the war in the first place. It could seriously be that if they got involved in the war, Lukashenko probably wouldn't be in power in, say, a few days, or maybe even a week after that decision was attempted to be made. And that may be why we never really see the Belarusians get involved. Because yes, Putin does call the shots, and Putin is the larger country, or leading the larger country of these two leaders, and they can tell Belarus a lot of what to do and where to go and where they will end up in the end. But the reality is that they're still limited inside of Belarus by interior or domestic factors. kind of like Poland, for example. They're kind of limited on what they can and can't do by their own internal domestic matters. Because, yeah, it sounds great, considering that everyone's on a Western side, to allow Ukrainian grain to enter Poland and then be bought so that way the Ukrainian economy can be floated. But they're still limited. Like, regardless of what the Polish government would like to do for Ukraine, they are still limited by internal domestic factors. When Poland started to buy grain from Ukraine or allowed it to be imported into Poland, it started undercutting Polish farmers more than anything we've ever seen before. It was destroying the Polish agricultural sector, and no one was able to make a living anymore because Ukrainian grain was coming in and flooding the market. And so while Poland is probably one of the most pro-Ukrainian governments ever, they had to block Ukrainian grain shipments from entering the country, completely bar it from being imported. And not only that, the Ukrainians ended up suing them, trying to force the Ukrainian grain to be allowed to be imported into Poland. They dropped that a little later, but still that was something that happened. And that's a good example, much like we have here in the West, about what could be happening behind the scenes with Russia and Belarus. Russia, much like Ukraine, wants something to be done in a sphere that is supportive of their interests. But the problem is that Belarus may not ever be able to get involved in this war and survive. That is probably one of the biggest problems they're looking at right now. And so no matter how much Putin says, you're going to go to war, you have to go to war, Lukashenko is saying, I cannot, it doesn't matter what you say, because if I do try and make that decision, the military is going to overthrow me, and then this country is not going to be in your control, it's not going to be in my control, it's going to be in the control of some third party. And who in the world knows what that third party is going to end up doing? So it may actually be the reality. They just simply cannot invade, and this is a truthful statement. It may be that with this buildup on the border, there's been massive infighting in the background in the Belarusian government, and he may have been given an ultimatum just over the past day or two while we were covering it by the military that you either publicly say we're not going to invade and make sure that we don't, or we're going to overthrow you. One or the other. Pick your poison. And then he picked the poison of not getting overthrown, but not invading Ukraine and listening to what Putin wanted either. That could be a very likely reality there. So I would say, really, to be honest, I kind of believe it. Because if Belarus could have invaded, they would have already done it, and they haven't. And I have a feeling that there's still some sort of a interior domestic factor that's going on in Belarus right now that is ensuring that they just can't go to war. Now, of course, I will look really stupid if I end up getting proven wrong in this in about a week and they end up invading Ukraine, but that's largely what I'm working off of right now. I've been working off of that personally for about 2 years at this point, since we first started to hear about the rumors of the military kind of running Belarus instead of Lukashenko, at least in terms of these kinds of decisions. And so for that reason, I'm still sticking with that logic for now until it's completely thrown upside down on its head, and then I'll just say I'm wrong, and then we'll work with the situation at hand then. But with that,
I think you do have a good point, though, because there probably is some type of internal political struggle happening inside of Belarus right now, because that makes sense, because it wouldn't serve Belarus's interest to go and invade Ukraine. It wouldn't serve their interest whatsoever. So, the catch is, what type of leverage does Putin have over Belarus to make them do something that would go against their national interest? And the only thing that I could think of is Putin could turn the narrative on Belarus and say not only is Ukraine being overrun with these quote-unquote bad people that are trying to hurt Russia, but now it's spread to Belarus, and they're now infiltrated with the same people, and we should expand the war their direction as well, because I don't know if this is correlated, but a Russian drone, just flew into Belarusian airspace yesterday, and from what I was told, Belarus had to shoot it down. I'm not sure if that was unintentional or maybe a warning to Belarus or something like that, but I think the threat of Belarus getting some very bad repercussions from Putin's regime, that still is on the table, regardless of what type of internal politics are happening, and Belarus has to keep that in mind, regardless of what they think.
I would have to agree with that, and that's largely why I would have to agree with a smaller minority of people, the 20-something%, that said that they think what Lukashenko is saying is true. I actually think it's true. A lot of people never believe anything that the Belarusians or the Russians say, but in this particular instance, I'm going to believe what they're saying, because it seems like it would make a bit of sense to me based off of the trend that we've seen so far throughout the entirety of the war. So with that in mind, I hope that does address that fairly well. It's kind of an important thing to cover. And also, this is something, I'm going to point this out here. This is something that you see that happens in Russia, but this never happens in Belarus. And this once again furthers my idea. Lukashenko hasn't been going around because apparently he's not as paranoid as Putin has been throughout his entire reign to be throwing people out and arresting them and trying to go after and persecute people that aren't in the in-group. Lukashenko hasn't really done that a lot publicly, from what I understand. It's more like people have been appointed in their positions and they pretty much stay there forever, or they end up retiring or something along those lines, but another person's brought in and there really isn't a lot of fuss about it. However, the situation is completely different in Russia, because we were able to hear that another Popov was arrested today. This time, it was the former Deputy Defense Minister, Pavel Popov, who looks like one of the seven dwarves, interestingly enough. But they yanked him out of the diamond mine that he was working in near Snow White, and apparently he's being detained in Russia for fraud on a particularly large scale, probably because he's one of the seven dwarves and he ended up getting into the deputy defense minister position, and dwarves are barred from entering that position, probably the fraud that he ended up committing. But anyways, to read you all the exact news that we have about this guy, former Deputy Defense Minister Pavel Popov has been detained. The Army General was dismissed from his post 2 months ago. He worked as Deputy Defense Minister for 11 years and supervised the system of Russia in Russian defense control centers. The case against him is related to the activities of Patriot Park, investigators said. He is accused of fraud in the construction and maintenance of the park. Popov worked with Shoigu for a long time. Since 1996, he worked in senior positions in the Russian Emergencies Ministry. From 2008 to 2013, he was the deputy head of the Emergencies Ministry. Now, some of y'all are wondering...
Kind of weird, man. Kind of weird how everybody that worked under Shoigu is suddenly found to be corrupt after Shoigu gets ousted. Kind of weird how that timing worked out.
It is really weird, I will have to say. And also, I had to go find this for y'all. So, here's Moscow. Because I've got to show y'all what the fraud was over. Because they're talking about Patriot Park, which is this really famous thing that a lot of people in America misunderstand. Because they go, wow, y'all, Russia built this like really cool park. You can go shoot tanks and machine guns. That's this park, Patriot Park, right here. This is it. Patriot Park. A park for patriots. A park for Russians. Is that a prison? I don't know.
I don't know, man. It looks like a prison.
Well, apparently it's some sort of a military academy, attached to Patriot Park. That is interesting. But anyways, Popov, who constructed Patriot Park, and I got to put some emphasis on the P's here, built this. This is what Patriot Park is. They have this massive cathedral as well for the armed forces. And they say that the embezzling to build this thing was insane. They say that this was where most of the embezzling went on, because this thing was way upcharged for what it actually was. And they ended up trying to figure out ways to pretty much get as much money to their buddies as they could, and then have it eventually come back to them in the form of a kickback. They also have displayed some pretty interesting stuff here that actually is fairly rare. For example, a Yag Panther and a Yag Tiger. Yag Tigers are actually fairly rare. There weren't a lot of them made in World War II, so seeing one in existence at all is pretty unique. They also have an operational, I believe, if I remember correctly, an Mi-26. Let me see here what else I can show you. They have a Tiger 1. Not operational. The only operational Tiger 1 left in the world is in Bombington Tank Museum. It's Tiger 131. They also have a load
Give it enough time, and give it enough time in this war, and you'll probably see these things operational again. You'll see Yag Tigers roaming around the Ukrainian battlefield, and probably every other historical tank they've got. They'll find a way to make it operational if they need to.
Man, I bet you they will, but I don't think they'll be getting this one operational anytime soon.
They call that the rusty camo. You can't tell it's operational or not, but it could start firing.
Man, and then they got the Stug. Ugh.
Oh.
Ugh.
Now that one is really bad.
That was pretty rough. And then they got I don't know what the hell this is. I guess this is the help I'm on fire camo from like 2023 maybe. We can see the cathedral again. We can see the inside of the cathedral again. It's not really that impressive, I'm not going to lie. I don't really like the interior design of it. It seems a little bit too mystical for my tastes. Like, it's almost like they were going for like a fantasy feeling in a cathedral, which those two things just I don't know, they don't really blend, you know? Like, it's not really traditional. But then they have a whole bunch of stuff out for the public. People make this thing out to be a lot more than it is. The reality is that a lot of this equipment is in pretty rough shape. Like this thing, for example, right here. You can see the tires are already dry rotting on this thing. Like, it's not like they're bringing their best here. They're bringing their worst. And some of these vehicles might be good vehicles, but really, most of them are the worst. We can also see some of the T-14 and T-15s right here that never made it into service and were canceled this year, that were at Patriot Park. But beyond that, there was a lot of embezzling and a lot of corruption that was involved. What the hell is that?
That is, wait a minute, that's the Killdozer, but it's an actual tank.
I've never seen this thing before in my life. I don't even know what the hell this thing is designated as. Like,
This right here is what the Russians were actually trying to go for when they built the barn around their tanks. Like, they were trying to do this, because this actually looks like a final version of that. Like, if they really perfected it, but like look how it dwarfs that little thing next to it. Like, this thing's literally a house.
Dude, I don't know what this thing is, and I see a lot of people saying it's a mouse. No, it's not a mouse. This thing is Soviet. You can tell by the track linkage, the suspension, and also that this thing is not a turret. It's a fixed rear area of the hull, or a part of the superstructure. I have never seen this thing before. Someone said it looks like an Su-14. Let's find out. It is. You have a very keen eye. This is, in fact, a turreted S-14. Here it is at the Kubinka Tank Museum before it was moved to Patriot Park. So, good eye right there. Pretty impressive that you got that right. That is an Su-14. And then some people are going to be like, what the hell is this? This isn't really that impressive. It's a T-35 land ship. They built 35 of these before the outbreak of World War II. And by the time World War II happened, these things were obsolete. So they never really were used. It was kind of like a propaganda tank at that point. And they do not do that well in actual service. But still, oh, look! A Panzer II and an SDKFZ 251. That's pretty cool. You don't really see a lot of Panzer IIs anymore. What the hell is this? BTR, ZD, maybe. More like a BMD command vehicle, possibly. Motorcycles. These are really militaristic.
Hey, that looks like a Honda Goldwing right there.
You know, I think that is a Honda Goldwing, dude. Yeah, it is a Honda Goldwing.
It's that old type that you have to be like 70 plus to drive.
Yeah, it's just like, dang, dude, all right. We also got a Topol. That appears to be rusting and in really bad shape, but that's most of the Russian military. We got this T-64 BV covered in snow. And we also have these weirdly painted tanks. I have no idea why they're painted that way. But beyond that, this is where the big money embezzling was done. And apparently this is what Pavel Popov is being arrested for. But still, I think he's being arrested for being one of the 7 dwarves from Snow White and the 7 Dwarves. That's what I think he's really being arrested for, but we'll never know. We'll never truly know. Holy hell. Wow, that's cool. A Ka-50. Those are actually really rare.
Is that the alligator?
This is the original alligator, the one that the Ka-52 Black Shark, well, not the Black Shark, the Ka-52, hang on, what in the world do they call the other one nowadays? I think this one was called the Black Shark, and the Ka-52 is called the alligator, but this is the original Black Shark that they used in Chechnya during the very early 2000s, and this is where they ended up getting the idea that a counter-rotating propeller attack helicopter would actually not be that bad of an idea, and this is what kicked off the development of the Ka-52. So these are actually fairly rare, at least the one pilot cockpit version.
Yeah, they look almost identical to the new one. Like, I'm not really sure what they really changed on it, because it looks like virtually the same.
Well, they didn't really change much. If you wanted to say they changed anything, here, I'll show you a picture of a Ka-50 in flight. So everything from the cockpit back is the same on both of them. Literally, it's identical. The one thing that was changed on them, though, is that the modern one has a tandem cockpit for a pilot and a co-pilot, and also an air-to-ground radar. And also a advanced, supposedly an advanced optical, like pretty much an eyeball on the bottom of the fuselage. Those are the things that they changed. But beyond that, everything about the 2 helicopters is pretty much the same.
That's pretty interesting right there. It's like the Russian philosophy. They can't copy something, then just make something minute changes to like a current design and then call it brand new, and it works.
Yeah, it's whack. And also, man, everything at this park, dude, is like rotting. Like, I don't know why people hype this park up so much. Oh, an SU-100. Now, that's a sight. You don't see those much. Like, these things are stupid looking, honestly. But anyways, what else?
Do they have an exhibit for the embezzling? Like, do they have a guy in the corner like stealing the stacks of rubles and
Yeah,
stuff in the corner for like posterity's sake?
Here's the embezzlement room right here. This is where all the embezzlement went down in this diamond encrusted room.
They got the diamond encrusted room. They've got looks like display boxes for something, and like all the columns, and their ceiling is like gone like crazy ornate. Man, this is like in just this room alone right here. That's probably where most of the money went.
Dude, I'm telling you, it probably is. It, like, honestly, no lie. I can tell you, I could look at this park for a while and just really marvel at a lot of the stupid. Ooh, they have a Soma S-35 from France, like one of the capture ones. Like, I don't know if y'all know about this. This is an actual. Let me see here, a Soma S-35. Let's see here. I got to type in Soma in front of it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so many people may not know this, but in World War II, Germany was actually really pressed for tanks. Like, they didn't ever really have enough, so they ended up capturing a lot of French tanks, and when France surrendered, well, at least mainland France surrendered, they ended up absorbing all of their tanks that they had during the Battle of France into their army that were still operational. This is what the tank actually looked like before it was used by the Germans. And a lot of these, like a lot of people always think, oh, the Germans, like it was all Tiger 1s, Tiger 2s, Panthers, all this stuff. No, actually what most of the Americans went up against in D-Day were these German Suma S-35s that had been captured and repurposed by the German army. I don't know why they have one of these at Patriot Park, because the reality is that these were hardly ever, if not ever, used inside of Eastern Europe. These were pretty much exclusively used in Western Europe and France and also Western Germany. So that's pretty wild to see that they have this thing in a museum. I don't know why they'd have this in the museum, because it really has nothing to do with the Great Patriotic War. It really has to do with the war we won, World War II. So that's weird. But oh my goodness, what the hell is this?
That right there is for contacting the satellite on the weekend.
Dude, this thing is a Tor on roids. They call this thing the Toroid or something like that. It's like, what the hell is this thing on top of it? I have never seen this before either. This is all new to me. What the hell? No. Dude, they went and uglified a BMP-3. What is this turret? I've never even heard of the development process. Oh, look, it's Norlon. But I've never heard of the development process behind this turret. I've never seen this turret in my life. Wait a minute, they have more?
I guess they knew it was a failure too, is for them to put the Orlan next to it. They're like, well, if the big vehicle doesn't do it for you, we have this Orlan over here you can look at. It's like, I'll take the Orlan.
It's like, ooh, no way. They built a victory arch too. This is embezzling central. Like, the more I'm looking, I'm like, wow, they really are embezzling out here, aren't they? And then they just have a whole bunch of destroyed equipment they just threw out all over the place, like a Centurion. Where the hell did they even destroy a Centurion? Does anyone know? I don't know. Oh, an Ashorn. That's kind of cool. Here's one of the pictures that people really like take out of proportion. They're like, wow, look how cool they are. And this isn't really that cool. I mean, it's not that impressive, especially considering most of this is junk. It's not that cool. But oh my god. Dude, it's endless. Like with the embezzling, like it's endless out here. But anyways, beyond the pictures, because we've got to get out of the pictures here and actually get into some real talking points, things that we can ask you all about here, about Papa Smurf or the man who's in the Seven Dwarfs here. Was this man involved in some corruption? Like, was he actually involved in embezzling? Or is Putin just purging the guy because he was one of the top guys and he's now out of the End Circle, and you got to get him now because he's out of the End Circle? What are y'all thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it, Matthew? Do you think he was purged, or do you think he was actually corrupt?
All right, so the big question here is, do you think that Shoigu's former defense minister, the guy you see right there in the picture, that fellow right there with that face, he said, do you think he was actually corrupt, or is it a Putin purging? So 50% said he was both corrupt and also being purged by Putin, while 29% said he was actually corrupt, and 15% said it was solely a Putin purge. And I would have to say that pretty much every Russian official out there is corrupt. So this guy was no different. And I would say all the ornate decorations and the victory arches and all the grand poobah stuff that's going on there at that museum, I would say this guy was definitely part of the corruption as well. He was getting some kickbacks, I'm sure, of some sort. So there probably is some truth to it. But then again, if Russia was really serious about prosecuting every single case of corruption, basically everybody in the government would be put in prison. So that wouldn't work. So it mainly is a purge, but he was also corrupt as well. So I'm with the 50%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that he was corrupt and he is being purged. Now, I don't think anyone can look at Patriot Park here and say that this man was not one of the most corrupt people alive in Russia, because this is literally just raw embezzling out here at this place. Like, it's an entire compound that they built out here. I mean, it's crazy, really, like, when you think about it and you look at this thing. And better yet, I think we can actually get, yeah, we actually can get a street view out here. So let me see if I can get y'all the street view, because we've got to get the street view here and show this to y'all. There's the cathedral of embezzling of grandeur. And then over here, see, where the hell is that? Where is the arch? The victory arch. Did they just build that? Did they embezzle some extra on top and then get the arch? Because there was an arch. What the hell? Wait a minute, hold up. Hold up, everyone. We're going to have to take a pause for a minute. Okay, so this is supposed to be like, you know, and let me explain this really quickly. By Russian Orthodox tradition, the ground that this cathedral is sitting on is what would be called hallowed ground, or something along those lines. It's supposed to be sacred ground. So then they went, bled, what's this sacred more than a giant church with gold domes, bled? I know, a trench network right outside. Well, you gotta be kidding me here. Oh my lord, it is a World War II recreation of trench works. You've got to be kidding me with this. Right outside the cathedral, too. Like, it's right next door. There's no way. Like, they've got to... This is crazy, dude. It's right outside of the cathedral. It's like a war zone out here.
Do you think they bring the conscripts out here and let them have some fun?
I think they do. Like, dude, they can use this for trench warfare training. Like, right outside of the freaking cathedral. No way. Like, this is the... And also, look at this sad little excuse of the plane. Like, I don't even know what the hell this thing was, but this sure as hell is not a German plane. Like, they didn't even make that look convincing. This is nuts. I can't believe... Look at this. They just literally threw junk out here in the middle of the park to make it look like a war zone. It doesn't even look like a war zone. This just looks like garbage and like a quickly dug trench. There's just tires sitting out. This is, you can't make this stuff up. Now, I bet you this is the part where they embezzled the money, because they said we made this interactive experience and it was like $500 million. But the reality of it is that this is maybe $20,000 of work and like $5,000 of junk, maybe. What is this? The red background really made me think something else there for a second, but...
Seems kind of devilish.
It really does, man. It seems like that kind of thing where Kadyrov would show up and he'd go, or something like that. You'd be like, whoa, go back to where you came from. But anyways, still, I can't put this out there enough. I think the guy was 100% corrupt. But I'd also say that I think as well, the guy's being purged, because he's fallen out of favor. There was nothing wrong with Patriot Park, which was built a while ago, actually, until he got removed. And now he's going to be charged. So I would say it's probably a purging that's going on in the background. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my honest opinion. And with that, it's time for us to move on from Papa Smurf here, or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And it's time for us to start moving on and into southern Russia, where we've heard some interesting news there today, and the rest of the news coming out of Ukraine. But, Matthew, before we get on into that, I understand that we got a couple of questions. And what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our first Super Chat segment of the night, we have our first one here, which goes to JMP Traveler, the channel legend, by the way. He puts in a $100 donation, and thank you very much, JMP, for that massive support. He said, for the holiday fund, and if you want to take a short trip out of the U.S., I can highly recommend Iceland, and I've been there 3 times, and I love it so much.
And I thank you so much for the massive support, JMP Traveler, your 10th Super Chat to the channel ever, according to YouTube. And I gotta say, we would love to travel around the world. Eventually we will. I don't know when. It'll probably be when this war is over, and who knows when that will be. But beyond that, I would like to go to Iceland one day. I would like to see the place because everyone always talks really highly of Iceland. They're always like, it's really cool. It's really neat. You ought to go there one day. You ought to see it. A lot of people say that really about everywhere. Everyone's like, you got to go to the Netherlands. You got to go to Germany. You got to go to France. You got to go to Italy. You got to come back to the UK. You got to go to Poland. Everyone wants us to go everywhere, and I cannot wait to go everywhere and see everything one day. But for this trip, because we've actually gotten everything put in place, we're going to be staying here in the United States on this little vacation. I can't say where, and I know some people are prying. They're trying to figure out where, but I can't say where. But I will tell you all this. We're not going to be like super secretive about this, like we're going on some sort of like a super secret mission or anything. We just got to keep it on the down low what we're doing until we get there and we start doing it and we're on the way back. And once we're on the way back, we are going to be uploading loads of pictures and maybe even little clips and videos showing what we were doing on this trip. This is going to be incredibly cool. It's going to be something that we've never done before in pretty much every single aspect. And it's just going to be neat. I can't wait to do it, really. And I can't wait to show all of y'all it as well, because I know that a lot of y'all like the rabbit holes. And a lot of people love and enjoy hearing the little historical rabbit holes that I throw out sometimes. And they're just cool. And I really love telling them because I'm very into that stuff. I absolutely love talking about that kind of stuff. And this trip in its own right actually is a massive rabbit hole in itself. Crazily enough, I generally had a plan in the beginning. It was a completely different plan than the one we have now, to do something where I could kind of go on rabbit holes and take pictures and then rabbit hole about the things we took pictures of. But then Matthew came up with an equally good plan that it was, in fact, even a little bit better. And then we went with that one. So it's still kind of the same thing, but it's going to be really, really cool. Also, one more thing I was wanting to say really quickly before we move on to it, is that eventually, I can't say this, I'm going to mark this off of the map for y'all. I'm not going to Colorado, so that's why I'm talking about some stuff in Colorado, because there's this really cool thing I found out about recently, Matthew, and I was like, oh, that's super cool. Down here in this city, Canyon City, if you want to call it that, or Cannon City is what I would call it, we have this thing called the Royal Gorge Railroad. And I know a lot of people are like, oh my god, it's the Enforcer in trains again. You've got to be kidding me. But this one is really neat. Like, I promise you, this one's really neat. So let me show y'all this. So this thing goes through what's called the Royal Gorge, and the Royal Gorge is pretty much a straight edge cliff that goes straight down to the Arkansas River. And they run these scenic trains, these old EMD F-7s, up and down the gorge, and it's really cool. I mean, it's actually pretty high class, like the whole like trip and everything. It's really neat. But let me see if I can actually get a picture of the Royal. So this is the Royal Gorge, like what it looks like the entire length of it.
Interesting. That looks pretty cool, actually. Like, I've never seen this one, but it looks cool.
Yeah, it's incredibly cool. What's really cool about this? Like, I was dying to go into this rabbit hole, and now that you're saying it looks cool, I can actually go into this rabbit hole a little bit. It actually has a hanging bridge, which is really unique because the bridge actually isn't supported by any structures below it. It's supported by these, like, arches. Well, not really arches, these V-shaped steel beams up here above the bridge. They support the entire weight of the bridge and the locomotive when it crosses over. It's one of the few bridges like this in the world, which is really unique in its own way.
I like that, man. I like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now, what if I told you, Matthew, that a whole bunch of people from two different railroad companies back in the 1880s were shooting and killing each other in this canyon for control of the railroad?
I'd believe it. I'd have to believe as you told me.
Man, I told you, man, because I was like, man, this story is crazy. So to tell you all about this a little bit, I'm going to make this a very condensed version of the story. Back in the day when the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, which a lot of people would know as Santa Fe, and nowadays after their merger in 1996, they're called the BNSF Railroad. A lot of y'all will know them as the orange trains that travel around the country out there in the West Coast. But back in the day when that was called the Santa Fe Railroad, they were trying to build a rail access through this area of Colorado and through the area of the Royal Gorge. Problem is that there was another railroad called the Durango and Rio Grande that was also trying to build down this gorge as well, and they ended up getting into a lawsuit with each other about who actually had the right of access to the Royal Gorge area and building a railroad through it. So it turns out that the legal battle ended up becoming a slog and a literal battle in the courts. But because of that, the rival companies, which were both operating in the same area at the same time, were getting violent with each other. Like, rail crews would meet in the rail yards in the afternoons and start beating each other until bones were broken sometimes, trying to run the other off from the area and to make sure that their company maintains control and they were able to continue to make a living. So after a while, an interesting thing started to happen where the Durango and Rio Grande Railroad started building stone forts up and down the entire length of the Royal Gorge, and every single time any Santa Fe railroads would try and pass through, they would end up throwing rocks down on the crews or trying to hop on board the trains and throw tools into the Arkansas River, screwing over the railroad crews. Like, for example, if you lose the shovel on a locomotive in the day, you couldn't shovel coal into the firebox anymore, so you're pretty much stuck there until someone brought you a new shovel. So beyond that, it started getting pretty bad. But then what was really interesting about this is that they got so violent that Bat Masterson, which some of y'all will know, because Bat Masterson is a legend of the Wild West, ended up getting hired by the Santa Fe Railroad to go down there with an armed posse of men, like 50 of them, and end up taking over and holding down the Durango and Rio Grande's roundhouse, pretty much denying them access to any of their trains and stopping them from using any of their rolling stock at all. Like, the railroad pretty much shut down at that point. So then the Durango and Rio Grande finally ended up winning at least a part of the legal battle, where the district court, the federal district court, said that they actually had the right of way to building the railroad and operating it through the Arkansas River area and the Royal Gorge. And so then they ended up getting about 100 guys showing up to Cannon City, and they said, Sheriff, we got a writ here that says we have the right of way down the Royal Gorge, so we want in it. And so then the sheriff said, well, yeah, but how in the world do we get them out of here? Because they're down at the roundhouse right now, and they're like, they're armed. There's 50 guys down there with guns. So then the Durango and Rio Grande, they're like, hey, that's fine. We got 100 guys with guns. We can just deputize all of them, and then we can go down there and take it from them. Hell, we could borrow the cannon from the local armory. And then they went walking down the street, and then they realized that Bat Masterson had stolen the cannon from the armory, and they had it pointed right down the street at them to pretty much blow everyone away if they got too close. So then a firefight ensued. Bat Masterson's people retreated out of the roundhouse, and then the Durango and Rio Grande River, the railroad, they actually ended up getting control of the roundhouse and telegraphing back to their company that they had gotten control and won the battle, pretty much, or really the war of the Royal Gorge. But then at that point, the district court came in and then flipped the past decision on appeal and said, no, actually the Santa Fe has access. And now the Durango and Rio Grande is going to have to end up partially liquidating some of their assets in the area and giving it over to the Santa Fe. But then eventually they got it back. It was a whole thing. But it was an actual war. And there are some debates. No one really knows for certain. There are some debates that people actually got shot and killed in this entire thing from one side or the other. But there's been no definitive proof to ever come forward and show that. But still, one of the more obscure and unknown battles of American history. It's kind of like the battle of, the Toledo Bay War up in the Michigan, Ohio area, which a lot of people don't know about either. But still, a really cool story to tell, and also a really neat background to this whole entire route down here. But really pretty stuff. Really neat to see. I wish we could take a vacation to this thing and go see it, like just the Royal Gorge itself. Not really the railroad, but the gorge. But sadly, we won't be doing that this trip. We're going to be doing something else. But there's a lot of cool stuff to do in Colorado, actually, because it's got a lot of the Rocky Mountains. Well, not really the Rocky Mountains. The Rocky Mountains are, like, all the way over here, I think. Well, no. Actually, they are right here. I guess this entire thing is the Rocky Mountains, if I'm thinking correctly. But anyways, beyond that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I give it a little bit of a cool story, I suppose. But beyond that, I got to thank you so much once again for that massive support, JMP Traveler, and helping this channel to keep on running. I thank you for so much for wanting us to take a vacation. I wish we could go to Iceland, but we're going to be in America, and it's going to be incredibly cool to show y'all what we're going to be doing and talk about and everything like that. Because it's just going to be neat. It's going to be neat. It's kind of like that rabbit hole's neat. I'll be able to tell y'all another cool rabbit hole that's equally as neat, but it'll be elsewhere. But still, let's see here. The Rockies are in Colorado. Okay, Steven, that is correct. The Rockies are in Colorado. And let's see here. A lot of people are saying the battle for the Toledo Strip. That's an interesting story. We might be able to get into that in the question segment at the end of the stream, but that's an interesting story in its own right. But still, thank you once again, JMP Traveler, for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you alone, the folks who enjoy this channel enough that they want to support it, that make this thing possible. No one has to support this channel, not a soul. But if folks do enjoy it and they want to see it to keep on running, they can support. And I got to thank you for being one of those people, JMP Traveler, and helping this channel to keep on being possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one right here is going to go to Seba, who puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, Seba, for that support as well. They said, do you think that the oligarchs are trying to get Putin to quote-unquote retire?
Not really. Because you see, the thing is that the oligarchs are where they are right now because of Putin. Putin pretty much installed them. Unlike other countries where sometimes the businesses will end up having a decent amount of sway. In Russia, the companies really don't have a lot of sway. It's really the central government that still has the control, and those oligarchs can as easily be removed as they were installed. Putin can just have these people killed. So the oligarchs really don't have a lot of say. They just have to do whatever they're told and really live with the conditions they're in, and if they don't like it, they'll probably end up dead one morning. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least from my understanding of it, Seba, and I could be wrong, but for the large part, I understand the oligarchs really don't have a say in how anything goes in that country. They just kind of have to rake in the money and enjoy raking in the money at any cost. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. Big thanks to you once again, Seba, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on back into the rest of the news.
All right, and this one is going to go to Sean Heaton, who puts in a $20 donation. Thank you, Sean, very much as well for the support. He said, thanks for your daily update and LSA and buy a car.
Hey, and thank you so much for support, Sean Heaton, and helping this channel to keep on running. Thank you so much once again for enjoying this daily update. It is folks like you and your support who helps to make these daily updates possible each and every day, 6 days a week. And I got to thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel massively, supporting it, and helping it to keep it running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running day in and day out, every single day, 6 days a week, pretty much forever at this point, for about 3 years. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. And also, and we will make sure to buy a car. I don't know what kind of car we'll get, but it'll be a nice one, that's for sure. I'm thinking something like a nice 1984 Honda Civic with 500,000 miles on it. I'm thinking that. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's now time for us to get back to the news. And we got a lot of it. Moving on down into the area of Mikhailovka, we got to see that another fuel depot ended up blowing up overnight. This one's the Atlas Oil Depot. Oh, that's fiery.
That's a big fire right there. That's an inferno.
Ебать, блин.
Ебало нахуй.
There we go.
Оба, нихуя себе. Уходим.
Oh, he sounds like he's having... Oh!
Бочка
I
разгорелась.
don't know, he might have got a little singed or burned.
He's standing further away now. He's like, it's kind of hot out there.
Это поближе будет.
Ukraine seems to keep on hitting these things.
Метров 200 до бочек стоит. Охуеть.
And that's the end of those clips, but I have to say, it's quite warm out there, and it's even warmer down in Shotki. Because down here, we got to hear that there's apparently a little bit of a local blackout, specifically because of the fire. Blackout in Shakti town, our Rostov region, as a result of the fire at the local substation. Terrible, isn't it? Terrible news. But anyways, looks like the Russians are not doing that well. Looks like they're flaming on, and flame on they will. Moving on from that and over onto the area of Cherkasy, we also got to see a Ukrainian MiG-29 flying over the skies. Pretty cool to see. Not much more to add, just a cool picture. But moving on out of that and into our location unknowns, we were also able to see a lot of cool stuff over here. Like this new BMP-2 that is in Ukrainian service. It's a very interesting one, because it has a new turret. It's almost like a BTR-4 turret that's been mounted on top of this thing. These things are incredibly rare. We don't really see them at all. This is really the first time I've seen one in the war. But really interesting to note that they are in active frontline use at this point. But moving on from that little bit of news and on to our next bit, we also got to see the Ukrainians making and testing new drones. We're going to be muting that, but we can see them here showing off all the stuff they use to make these drones.
I like how the Ukrainians are literally like getting all the components and even like right there crafting and 3D printing components for the thing. I always thought like they'd just buy them in bulk, like buy like pre-made ones like ready to go. But now that they're building them, I'm sure that gives them a lot more flexibility with what they're actually putting on the drone for like specific uses.
Dude, absolutely. And look at them go. I mean, they're really giving this thing a try.
I bet they're master drone builders by now too. They probably can build like a fantastic racing drone.
Man, I bet some of the best in the world are probably coming out of Ukraine at this point.
I don't know what would happen if you just rammed that into somebody. Like, would it chop them up?
I wonder. That's a good question, man. Dude, I think it might. I think it might chop them up a little. Oh.
Now imagine if they replaced the blades on this thing, you know, with like the normal plastic blades or something, and replaced them with like knives. Like that would be interesting.
I don't think it'd fly. I don't think it'd fly, man. Yeah, I think
it's carbon fiber knives or something.
Maybe. I'm still doubting it'd fly, like, to be honest with you. But we did get to see this restored Shilka today, though, Matthew. And look at this. They restored this thing like a classic hot rod. Look at this. It's operational. It fires. It's a miracle. It's a literal miracle.
I like it. They still have the tarp on the back too, so it's fresh.
Man, this thing is fresh off the block. I mean, really, this thing is going to be putting down some heat here in the future, and hopefully so. Hopefully we get to see a lot of heat being put down very hot, you know, like a nice, good burning fire. But we also get to see the Ukrainians shooting down a Shahed drone, and this is a very interesting clip. I actually have a duplicate of this one in the location unknowns further on down. But this is an Mi-24 using its front gun to shoot down a Shahed drone. So here's the clip. There's some shots. There's some more. Looks like they hit it right there. And down it goes, Bliet. To the skies below. They got it. Pretty impressive, isn't it? I mean, they got that thing. They blew it up with an Mi-24 and just the front gun. It's pretty cool, actually. But speaking of which, it looks like a lot of Russians didn't have a lucky day today. We got to see that apparently the Russian casualty report is pretty freaking high. Oh!
Oh my goodness, they got 15 Bobcats in a day, man. What the hell? They must have hit like a cache of Bobcats or something. That number is pretty high again, but that is fantastic to see. Also, the losses on the troops are crazy too, but tell us more.
Well, Matthew, they didn't hit a cache of Bobcats because Bobcats don't have usable currency. But we did get to see that 12... You see what I did there? You see what I did?
Shit.
But moving on from that, 1,200 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 18 APCs, 52 supply trucks, 3 main battle tanks, 27 artillery pieces, 21 drones, 3 cruise missiles, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 15 Bobcat skid steers. Now that is a cache of Bobcats. Call it cat cache. But anyways, still really nice numbers to see, and hopefully they'll continue to knock out Russians at this high of a pace. But moving on from that and out of the location unknowns and up into the Vovchansk area, we were also able to see a little bit of a battle going on in this area, and check it out. This is filmed by the border guards.
Кто тут?
Oh, must have the magic word.
And now they're getting the heat.
And now the magic bullets.
Do the border guards know how to guard that border? They're just firing out there.
I'm no expert, but this border seems pretty secure.
They are keeping it, they're kind of keeping it down a little bit.
They're following border control. We're right here. Oh.
You hear some sporadic firing still going on. Oh, a little explosion right there. Oh, a little grenade toss. An impressive finish. And that's the end of that clip, but I think the border guards are holding down that front fairly well. Moving on from that and over towards Vovchansk, we also got to see the Free Russian Army, or at least the Russian Volunteer Corps portion, destroying some Russian vehicles and equipment in this area. We see right down there, they're starting to highlight it. They're getting it ready to be destroyed. They don't play games here in the Russian Volunteer Corps because it's a corps of volunteers. They just don't get games with that.
And the instrument of destruction makes its way, oh, right into the tree.
I mean, you see that the smoke is starting to pile up. The vehicles are burning. My goodness.
I think they actually caught the trees on fire, actually. I don't think that's the vehicle.
I can't tell, Mandy, but something's on fire, and it should be. That's all I know. But still, very nice to see. It looks like everyone's doing their part up here in the Vovchansk front. Moving on from that and down to the area of Touretsk, we also get to see some city fighting going on in this area, or at least a small rock music. You love it. It's a 15-second clip, and we can't go without music. Buddy. But we can see here, here in the area, and they're about to hit something. Blow it up. Daboosh, and there they go. Right up on that building. Impressive stuff. Look at them go. Love to see it. Oh,
crap. Man, those buildings may be ugly, but they do hold up against some heavy fire. I will tell you that. That solid concrete will do it.
Man, that's concrete. But anyways, moving on from that and down into the area Yekhinivka, down here in the Pokrovsk area, we are seeing that the Russians are still trying to push towards the town of Pokrovsk. The Ukrainians are trying to stop them, and it appears that the Russians ended up getting hit today in this area by a drone. You can see these two guys are actually on an ATV, a four-wheeler. And they end up hitting the only piece of debris in the area right about there. One of them goes flying into the debris, the other guy rolls off, and the drone ends up kind of landing on one of them. Ooh! Terrible. But anyways, nice to see the Ukrainian FPV drones are still somehow doing their part. Moving on from that, we also get to see that a slag heap ended up getting hit by a drone. Many people are wondering, where in the world's Chris's mom? No, it's not that kind of a slag heap. It's a slag heap made of industrial waste that they built up into a giant mountain. But we could see the Ukrainians hitting it and the Russian flag on top of it here in this area. Please be patient. It's going to happen. And we can see the drone coming on in. We can see the heap right there. We can see the Russian flag right here as well, and bada bing and bada boom. They hit it, it's gone. Look at that. I gotta tell y'all, really impressive stuff right there, and love to see it. Hopefully they'll be able to hit some more areas around the spot like that, but you'll never know. We'll never know. But moving on from that and down towards Spartak, we also get to see that the Ukrainian Su-27 ended up dropping some aerial guided bombs onto the town of Spartak right here. This was released by the Ukrainian Air Force, and they have rock music as well. But there goes the bombs. They are bombing them. Look at that.
Yes. It reminds me of the Israelis with their 2,000-pounders. They love those big ones.
Oh, those 2,000-pounders. But moving on out
Oh,
of this...
those carp.
Oh, those carp. But moving on out of this area and the Pokrovsk battlefield and down into the area of Uruzhane, we also get to see a destroyed Russian tank down here, a T-62M, nonetheless, got burned to the ground. Very sad, very unfortunate. I mean, really, a museum piece like this being burned, I feel like this is a crime against culture. But moving on from that and out of that area, around Uruzhane, or Uruzhane, whichever way you want to call it, and now near Huilipol, we also get to see the Ukrainians shooting down an Orlan drone in this area with Strela. You're bad. Yeah! Oh. Yeah!
Да, є,
I
красавчик!
did it.
Розхід одна, один олівець, ціль, Орлан, ціль знищена.
Interesting. You know, this guy sounded like a kid in a candy store when the missile was first fired. He's like, yeah! Or something.
Oh.
But they did get him.
Goodness.
They did get him, and you gotta respect them for that. They did end up hitting it, and so big respect to them. Nice to see. And moving on from that onto the southern end, we also got to see that a Russian Zupok counter battery system was destroyed today in the area as well. There's the Zupok. It's about to be no-pok. Zoo. Only if the Russians are inside the exhibits, because I don't see no zebras. But they're about to get that thing slammed here in a second. Oh, dead on the nail.
Oh.
Oh.
The whole zoo park just went up in flames.
Man, I think it's wrong that the Russians just keep rolling up entire zoos up to the front lines and getting them blasted. Think about all the poor capybaras and all that stuff that are getting obliterated up in those zoos. That's unfortunate, really, when you think about it. But moving on out of the southern area and down into the area around Kherson, we also got to see down here near Rodinsk that a Buk surface-to-air missile system ended up getting destroyed in its dugout. There it is right there, charred remains. Much like Russians' hopes and dreams, really. They're kind of charred, too. But we also get to see up in Kazachi Lahri, some Russians were also getting bombed in this area as well. Rock music ensues, but we can see the bombs hitting simultaneously on this Russian compound.
They put something on the caption that was so obscene, the Ukrainians had to blur it out.
That's true. That's true. Gratefully enough. But you know something else interesting, Matthew? The Russians drink so much vodka, they're always hammered. It looks like the Ukrainians are giving them nails to hammer. That's a pretty good one, right?
Oh, блядь. The vodka, it's a hammer, you блядь, but the Ukrainian hammer, it hits you harder, блядь. That's the old proverb.
Yeah, old prophet, yeah. But anyways, moving on from that and over into Western Ukraine, we do have a little bit of unfortunate news to cover, which is a little bit sad to hear, but still a lot of people have been talking about it. According to the United States statement and in a Ukrainian, I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm actually really tired tonight. That's why I'm stuttering a lot. But a Ukrainian F-16 ended up crashing accidentally. According to the information that we have, the pilot died in the crash, and the Wall Street Journal reports that the crash was likely due to pilot error. A lot of people have been weighing in on this today and coming up with different explanations. The reality is that the amount of information that we have surrounding this crash is so limited, we actually have no understanding or really no knowledge on what actually happened to lead to the crash and also the death of the pilot as well. A lot of that information has not surfaced even yet at this moment. And a lot of people have been weighing in and kind of giving their ideas on what happened. Some people were saying that it was a lack of training that led to the crash that apparently was caused by pilot error. Some people are saying that accidents happen and it's a little unfortunate. Some people are saying that the F-16 just simply sucks, and some are a little bit unsure and undecided. But a lot of people have been throwing in their comments and their thoughts on why this crash ended up occurring and also resulted in the loss of a pilot. But Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so today, now that we got the very sad, unfortunate news that Ukraine has lost 1 out of their 6 operational F-16 fighter jets received from the West, what do you think is the main cause of the crash, based on what we know so far? So, 44% said it's an accident, they happen, and it's unfortunate, but of course these things do happen from time to time. 39% said it's a lack of training and too little time in the training seat, basically, and 3% said F-16s are simply not effective. And I would say the F-16 is certainly effective, so I could rule that option out immediately. It's worked for several countries, and many countries use them because of how effective they are. Also, Poland uses them as well, and they've never reported any issues. So they're saying that it might be pilot error. First off, I want to say this. Rest in peace to Moonfish, who was the pilot. He was actually the pilot that was in several of the videos showing off the training for the F-16 fighter jets. He was the one in those videos. So unfortunately, he did not survive the incident, and he did pass. So rest in peace to him. But for the jet itself, it's also a loss. And I would have to say, based on what we know, it's really hard to tell, but I would assume it's probably a lack of training or too little time in the training seat that probably led to this. But that's an assumption right now, and really, we need to wait for more information to come out. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, it probably was some sort of an unfortunate accident. Once again, I'll be honest, I'm more unsure about this because we have so little information. It could be anything. It could have been the failure of a ground crew that led to some sort of an instrument failing in the cockpit, which led to the pilot getting incorrect information and crashing the aircraft. It could have been pilot error in itself. The pilot may have had no training and ended up crashing the aircraft due to conducting a maneuver or an action that the aircraft cannot handle or allow. It could have been that the aircraft ended up trying to land and the pilot ended up screwing up there. We really have no idea what caused this crash, so I would have to just say that accidents happen and it's unfortunate, but things like this are bound to happen. They always happen. Even here in America, crashes do happen, and a lot of people are going to start playing this, probably a lot of pro-Russians or a bunch of clowns, and they're going to start saying that no F-16 has ever crashed in history. And I can think of multiple incidents where Thunderbird's F-16s have crashed conducting aerobatic maneuvers due to pilot error. Time and time again. It happens almost every 2 to 3 years, really, and it's just an occurrence, kind of like how aircraft crashing is generally a common thing, kind of like cars crashing, trains derailing, ships eventually running aground and being stranded or sinking. Things are going to be bound to happen. So I'm pretty sure it's just kind of not really a mundane, but an unfortunate mistake that was conducted, and that's really all there was to it. At least to me. But with that,
The weird thing to me, though, about this crash is, of course, there are ejection seats inside of F-16s. So I'm trying to figure out what situation basically would lead to Moonfish not being able to eject from the aircraft if it was hit or something like that. Because if they're alleging it's pilot error, that's currently what the assumption is by the journalist, is that it was pilot error. That doesn't explain why he wasn't able to eject out unless something happened so suddenly that he didn't have the chance to pull the lever. So I'll be very curious to hear the investigation that results from this, if there is one that's extensive enough to figure out what happened, because it's a little bit odd, just the whole circumstance.
Yeah, I would say so. It is pretty odd, and hopefully we'll find some information about it in the future, but due to operational security reasons, we'll probably not find out much about it because probably even where the aircraft crashed may be classified. If it ended up crashing during takeoff or landing, which is usually where most incidents actually happen, it probably was very close to its main airfield of operation, and the Ukrainians are probably wanting to try and keep that as quiet or on the down low as possible and ensure that there isn't really a lot of information getting out about where the F-16s may be based at, or at least one of the air bases that they rotate through pretty commonly. But with that, it is now time for us to move to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 918 of the war. And so without further ado, oh my lord, this is the shortest one. I was hoping that I'd be able to go get a water or something because I feel like I'm actually about to start dry heaving here because my throat's so dry. But without further ado, here is the speech.
Speech. Give me a speech.
Дорогі українці, дорогі українки, сьогодні особливий і дуже важливий день для нашої держави. 14-й рік. Захоплення Криму, бої на Донеччині та Луганщині, початок гібридної кровопролитної війни Росії проти України і початок українського воєнного спротиву. Героїзм тисяч наших людей, відданість нашій державі та військовій присязі, захист України і українські прапори, прапори шани до наших воїнів, які віддали своє життя заради України. 22-й рік. Повномасштабне вторгнення, повномасштабна спроба Росії знищити українців і повномасштабна українська оборона. Сміливість нашого народу, сила українського характеру і вдячність усіх наших людей, всієї нашої держави, кожному воїну і усім українським полеглим героям, які повертаються додому на щиті. Слава Україні!
And Heroam Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 918 of the war. And that also wraps up our news segment for the night and moves us on into the question segment where we get to talk to all of y'all. It's going to be an incredibly fun segment. There's much to talk about and much time, actually. But of course, I got to thank everyone so much for being here tonight so far. I got to thank the 10.8 thousand people who showed up at the peak to watch the stream. We're incredibly happy to have had all of y'all here so far. And make sure to stick around because we have a great deal to go. An incredibly fun amount of stuff to go and do. And also, Classic Logic, no, I did not get any water because I did not have enough time to get up and even leave. I just kind of had to sit here and wait. So the drive heaving feeling is still
If you want to go get some... If you want to go get some water, I'll stall for just a second. I don't have much to talk about, but it'll only take you like a minute to go get water, so you can go ahead if you want.
All right, sweet. Thank you very much, and I'll be right back while Matthew filibusters. So, Matthew, take it on away.
All right, folks, so it's Enforcer Matt now. I'm stalling for about a minute or two while the Enforcer goes to grab some H2O, some Aqua. So real quick, while the Enforcer is taking a momentary break, I wanted to give a shout-out to Rangers Rule, who's in the live chat quite a bit. They're a channel legend, by the way, and they are going through some cancer treatment right now. And I just wanted to say shout-out to Rangers Rule, because apparently it's getting a little bit rough out there, and I hope that they're hanging in there the best they can. And also to everybody else in the live chat as well. I've seen actually multiple people saying that they're going through stuff like that. Huge shout out to y'all as well, and I hope y'all are all doing well out there in the live chat, because of course that is pretty rough. I've never had to go through anything like that, thankfully, but hopefully y'all are hanging in there. But in the meantime, we don't have any polls to address, but I'm going to go over a different story right here that we have that I just have on the Twitter page right now. And we're going to see that the suspect, this is according to a German newspaper, by the way, they said the suspect in the Nord Stream bombing fled from Poland to Ukraine in a Ukrainian embassy car. And also, remember, this happened a while back, the Nord Stream bombing that happened a while ago. Someone sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline, but nobody really knows who did it, and is also very suspicious, the whole situation around it. So we're hearing from the newspaper Spiegel that allegedly it might have been a Ukrainian that did it. So it's up to y'all whether or not y'all think that's legitimate or not. To me, I think it sounds like a bunch of, honestly, BS talk. We really don't know who did that. There's been talk about someone going out on a yacht and chartering a yacht to go out there to do something. But, of course, it's all speculation, really. So it's up to y'all. I would run a poll on this if I wasn't filibustering for the Enforcer to come back. We might run a poll in just a minute. But, you know, it's just up to speculation at this point. But anyways, I just saw the Enforcer come walking by the door just now. So it looks like he's coming back down with his water. He'll probably be hopping on at any second right now. And I think he should be back on any second because I'm running out of things to say. So hopefully he is coming back here in just a minute. But anyways, if y'all have any questions in the live chat for me, let me know in the live chat. I'm not going to go ahead and answer in the ones in the spreadsheet right now. Oh, he's back.
Let him know. I'm back, everyone. I'm back. It took a little bit longer than I thought because there was no water. There was no water, Matthew. So I had to try and filter some water to drink it. We don't actually, funnily enough, folks, we actually don't have drinkable water here in this part of the city because it's filled with so much lime and calcium. You get kidney stones in a couple of months if you drink it raw. So you got to end up filtering the stuff so that way you don't get kidney stones. So I had to end up doing a little bit of that and then trying to get a ship as quick as I could and then come right back downstairs. Well,
unfortunately, while you're at it, as I got on the topic anyway while I was filibustering, I was coming up with some things to talk about. I was mentioning the story from the German newspaper about allegedly a suspect in the Nord Stream bombing fleeing from Poland to Ukraine in a Ukrainian embassy car. Have you heard that whole story right there?
I heard a little bit about it today, but I'm really, I kind of put that in the periphery a large amount with the news coverage because all of that's hearsay. You know, it's just people saying, we think this happened, we think that happened, and no story's ever really been ironed down much, and even still, that's really within a realm of speculation more so than anything.
Interesting. I was just saying myself when you were gone, I was saying it sounds to me like it's just hype talk. Like it's kind of like the whole thing about, you know, is Iran going to attack Israel tomorrow? It could happen in the next 24 hours. It's just a bunch of hype talk. Nobody will ever know until like there's concrete evidence to know who did it because it's all just like speculation, like these kind of like these rags, these newspapers that are kind of like a little bit sketchy. They come out and want to create big stories out of nothing basically with like shreds of evidence. And it just sounds like bogus to me. So we'll probably never know, but that's the current story.
Man, I got a better bogus story for you. Hold on, the news is low. Way back in the day, in the wild west of Russia, you know, someone hops on the train, stop the train, you know, and then they like slam on the brakes and they throw the engineer out and they're like, great job, everyone. We just stole 500 stealth fighter aircraft from Russia or something like that. And someone puts out a stupid story like that. It feels like that's kind of a similar vein to me at this point with the whole what happened to the Nord Stream pipeline thing. I feel like people are just coming up with whatever so that way people will pay attention to the stories they have to make up about it, because I don't think anyone knows anything about what really happened to that. I still think it's largely unknown. But that would be my take on it, and that's just me. But anyways, with that, let's see. Eddie Boanova said, your water supply sounds rough. It seems like standardized safe water from the tap would be highest priority. I know, right? Like, wouldn't that be a high priority? Like, wouldn't it be? Like, in a city like Birmingham, with the metropolitan area having 1.5 million people living in it, wouldn't that be, like, an important thing to pay attention to? I guess not, because, and also if y'all don't know this, the city of Birmingham has a very interesting history behind it, because our city's waterworks, which are responsible for maintaining the water supply of this metropolitan area, it actually went bankrupt about a decade or so ago, because of a massive amount of corruption that was involved from the officials running the waterworks. So that's kind of cool, right? And also, I don't know what it is, because back where we used to live here in Alabama, the water was actually really clean. Like, we lived in the middle of nowhere, but the water was actually clean, and it was, like, safe to drink straight out of the tap. You didn't even have to worry about it. But the water up here is very, it has a high amount of calcium and lime in it, specifically because there's this giant vein. You can actually see a good bit of it right here. That's made up of lime. You can actually see that this is the lime company, which is, processing and excavating lime in this area. And then there's also this massive vein, not just of lime, but there's also marble, or calcium bicarbonate as it's called in the area as well. And so you get a load of calcium and a load of lime in your water, and they don't end up filtering it out really much at all, because water quality standards in the United States are actually pretty lax. You can really have very low quality water and it still would meet the acceptable federal standard for clean drinking water. And for that reason, here in Birmingham, there's a higher incidence of kidney stones, because calcium is one of the key elements that starts to develop kidney stones. Kidney stones are really just an amalgamated mass, or a clump of calcium that's built up in your kidney and then broke loose. So
Did you know that, like, all the tap water around the whole country has an acceptable amount of pharmaceuticals in them? So, like, pretty much every like tap water around the country, it has like Xanax, it has like basically every pharmaceutical you could think of is in some form or another in the water to some degree. Because I actually read our water report at one point, and it had like all those different pharmaceuticals like listed there, and it was very minuscule parts per million, but it was still present, which to me is crazy. It's like, how does all of that stuff get in the water? I guess people are washing it down the sink or something. It goes back to the water treatment plant, and then they're not able to like filter all that out. So it's kind of weird. But yeah, the water in Birmingham kind of sucks, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like, no matter what you do to filter it, it doesn't really get it better. It's not like Flint water, like Flint, Michigan or whatever. That's like the horrific water, but it's not that great in Birmingham.
But you know something, folks? This is why I just can't get involved in, like, modern politics. Like not only does it divide people on points that don't matter, but the points themselves don't matter. Because it's like, why in the world are we talking about these other things when we could be talking about things like the federal government dishing out some of the largest amounts of categorical grants ever seen to every state, so that way these states can go and put money into the local municipalities to have their waterworks improved massively. And also, not only that, for the federal Congress to pass statute to ensure that drinking water quality must be at a much more higher and acceptable standard than what the current sitting standard is at the moment. That's the kind of thing. Like I just want to say this, folks. If I was the president of the United States, all right, if y'all voted for me in 2040, and this hadn't been done by then, and I'm sure it wouldn't be, because people are a little bit too stupid in the government at this point to pay attention to the real things that matter, I would make sure that I would be spearheading either executive orders or action by Congress to change the acceptable parameters that drinking water is within to have much higher standards, and I would also be pushing for Congress to approve categorical grants to every state government to be able to improve the water infrastructure inside of every municipality across the country. Of course, dealing with the big cities first, because that would affect the largest number of people, and then having it spread out into the rural areas not that long after. I feel like that is just one of the more important things that we should be focusing on, because it was a good while ago. Well, it wasn't really that long ago. About 30 years ago, everyone generally understood that the water quality was going to be pretty okay. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was all right. But nowadays, everywhere you go, it seems like there's some kind of a large questionability with the water quality that you get out of the tap. And the tap is supposed to be drinkable water. Like, it never was the concept that it's just, like bath water and stuff like that. It is supposed to be drinkable. And so it's getting a little bit ridiculous that at this point, people are having to install filters in their home to have drinkable water. It should be drinkable straight out of the tap. No,
It's honestly not just the water. It's not just the water either. It's the food as well. And I see some people saying in the live chat in here, they're saying that one particular fella, the worms, that guy actually brought that up about the food thing. That's the first person I've ever heard bring that up, how processed and honestly, how toxic the food's getting in the country, the way it's like being processed and stuff like that. Nobody talks about that stuff. Like, nobody really talks about the water quality. Nobody talks about the food because it's just something that everybody accepts. And everybody's like, well, it is what it is. And we're just going to move on from it. But in reality, if the politicians out there were doing their jobs, they would actually be looking at that stuff and actually trying to fix it. It's not exciting. It's not anything groundbreaking, but it's important. It's more important than some of these other things that they're focused on, to be perfectly honest, because if everybody's food is contaminated and everybody's water is contaminated, well, that's just going to lead to a horrible quality of life just by living every single day. So it's weird that there's nobody out there really caring about that anymore.
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy to me. It's bizarre. And also some people are saying, oh my God, is this politics? It's not, because guess what? No one's really talking about it. So I know that it's not anything that would be divisive, because do y'all hear anyone talking about it right now? No, I don't. Do you hear anyone? Like, do you hear the one person on the one side or the other talking about this right now? I don't. And that's why I'm talking about it, because it's something that people ought to know. Like, people ought to be outraged about this kind of stuff. Like, I don't know what the hell people are outraged about these days. It's things that won't really ever affect them, and the chances of it affecting them is astronomical, yet everyone gets tied up on that stuff. The effects of drinking bad water can be felt every single day. It's something that affects, at least in the Birmingham metropolitan area, 1.5 million people. Just alone in this one city, 1.5 million people, bad water affects every single one of them. And that's something that no one is talking about and really addressing. And that's why I find it so ridiculous, like that no one does. It's such an important thing. Like, everyone has to drive on the roads in Birmingham because there's no public transportation of any kind. So you have to have a car and you have to drive around the city. So 1.5 million people are affected by the road infrastructure quality, which means that should be taking top priority. And then not only that, 1.5 million people drink the water that's coming out of the tap in the city, meaning that it should be a top priority situation, a top priority issue. Those are like, you have there are certain building blocks of things that have to be done before you can move to other things. And right now, no one's focusing on anything but the very top of the pyramid, because at the bottom of the pyramid, you've got the basic governmental functions of administration, those really boring things that no one really wants to do, but you have to do them. And the problem is no one's doing them. Like clean drinking water, good road infrastructure, public transportation would be nice. Like, you don't have to have it in Birmingham because Birmingham's used to having none at all, but it would be nice to have, just to make things a little bit more convenient for people and getting around and everything. So that would be nice, but there is none. You would think that these things would be on the top priority. Not only that, you would think that cleanliness, like a public sanitation works, not just, picking up the trash. I'm talking about actually keeping the streets clean every day. You would think that would be a top priority as well, because everyone's got to mingle around in this city. But for some reason, none of those things are ever focused on. It's like that everywhere in America, and it's like, and then you'll hear people go, well, I hate so-and-so because they talk about this or something. And I'm like, it doesn't even affect you. Tell me one person I can't even get into it and really attack the issue directly, because then it would start getting political. It would be condemning both sides, though, but it would get political because I'd be bringing up specific talking points that people would rather die over than just, concede that they're goofy points. But that's
not being political, but one thing that tells me that we're doing something wrong in the United States is when you see Europe, for example. Europe has much more stringent food requirements and also water requirements compared to what we have here in the United States. and they're not having some of the problems that we're having over here. So that tells me there must be something to it, because I don't think people realize that if you're eating highly processed foods all the time, and I'm actually one of those people that eats those all the time just out of convenience, and it's a really bad habit of mine, and also the enforcer as well, and also drinking the water, which is probably contaminated as well, then that can probably lower your quality of life quite a bit, and you don't even realize it until you finally like got off of it and realized, dang, that was actually like pulling me down quite a bit, like eating all that nasty processed food and all that contaminated water. And we just won't ever know until you get off of it. And the truth is, it's hard to get off of it because the natural food is like 10 times more expensive than the highly processed food. You can buy the highly processed stuff for much cheaper than the actual natural, like good food to eat, which is crazy.
Also, I just saw someone, I timed them out because I want to say this, there's no domestic politics, okay? Because I just saw someone blame the state government of the state of Alabama for this and go, it's those specific people. If you vote for the other people, they're going to fix everything. So who was in charge of Michigan when the pipes in Flint were found out to be filled with lead and everyone was getting lead poisoning? Who in the world was in charge of that state when that happened? Oh, got you there. Because you see, it's not actually a one party versus the other thing like goofy people make it every damn time. It's something that no one's paying attention to, and it's a problem. Like, I don't know why in the world people always want to sit there and go, oh, well, my side's perfect. Because it's not. It's not perfect. Your side is as stupid and goofy as the other. Like, I'm just being honest here for a minute, all right? I'm not a big fan of sitting here and worshiping some of the stupidest people I've ever seen, and somehow they end up getting elected because a whole bunch of stupid people band together and vote for them. Like, I'm not into that at all. Like, the state of Michigan has a damn major problem with water infrastructure, and it's a completely different political group that's in charge in Michigan versus Alabama, and yet you still see the same kind of water quality problems in Alabama as you do in Michigan, because both of them are so far up their own ass talking about things that affect tens of thousands or maybe a couple of 100,000 of people a year, that they're not focusing on something that affects every single person every single day in this country. That is why I refuse to get into that category, because that's the kind of stupid asinine logic you start working on. Is, oh, well, I mean, you know, it's happening in Alabama because so-and-so's in charge, but in the other state where the other people in charge, it's still happening, but because they're my people, I overlook it, and I accepted that it's actually a good thing, or something along those lines. Like, I don't know who's drinking this Kool-Aid these days. Everyone is, it seems, but I'm not into it. Hell, I might not win in politics ever because I probably will not get along with a lot of people because I just won't stand for the crap. But this is the reality of it. You know, like that's 100% the issue. And so that's what I got to say about it. That's my piece. And you know, that is what it is. And also, Angry Puma said, both sides hate you. They do, because we've been attacked on this platform by other YouTubers and I'll just say on the far right and the far left. The far left, they call us Nazis, and then the far right call us communists. So I know we're going down a good center line here because no one can ever get us right. Like, we're either Joseph Stalin or we're Adolf Hitler, and there's no in between, because we don't agree with these people and what they stand for. Because these people are so blinded by their political bias that they don't even ever think common sense. Like, you know, like you can sit there and say, hey, that guy right there, he's like embezzling money. Well, he's in my political party, so it's fine. But the other side is full of demons, though, because they're embezzling money and stealing. It's like, but your side's doing it too. It's like you can't have a double standard here. You know, like you gotta do things across the board, you know, to be fair. And then people don't do that. And then people get shocked. Well, what's going on with all the corruption? It's like, you're supporting it. It's like, if you support it at all, it's going to keep on going on every side. You got to put it down equally across the board. You know, you can't, yeah, anyways, I'm going to start going to town on this because I saw someone say something and it really got me going, because it was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. And then trying to do a call to action, getting people to vote for a certain group. Like, look, I'm going to tell you this. I can promise you this. It doesn't matter what group you're voting for come this November. The water quality situation will not be fixed for the next 4 years. I promise you that. I can bank money on that. You can bet your bottom dollar that will be the case. So with that, hope that does address that the best I can. At least the best I can. And also, someone just said, we need independence. No. I'm not advocating for a specific group. I'm not advocating for the right, the left, or the independents. I'm just advocating for representatives, senators, and presidents that represent their constituents. It doesn't matter what group they're in. I just want people who actually represent their people that voted for them. Like, like improving their lives in actual ways that would impact the majority, not small issues that don't affect anyone. That's what I'm for. I don't care if those people are independents, Republicans, or Democrats. I just want people to actually do what they're supposed to be doing as elected officials. The other thing, that's up to y'all and how y'all vote, because I'm not going to get into politics and say one group is better than the other, because they all at least on the surface have good intentions. But that's up for y'all to vote for who y'all think has the best intentions for you, and hopefully everyone starts ending up voting any way they do more reasonably for candidates that actually look out for them, instead of candidates who just get into office and they don't really do much and they just keep on going onto the mainstream talking points. That would be my take.
Well, enforcer technically, or not really technically, but in reality, how it's supposed to work is and I'm being non-political with this, folks. I'm simply talking about the structure of the government. I'm not talking about parties, nothing like that, so let's don't get into it. But technically, the president gets up there and they're like the head of the country, the face of it, and things like that. Really, the bureaucracies, the federal agencies like the EPA and things like that, they're the ones who are supposed to actually go in and do the actual heavy lifting. And of course, those people are selected by the president, appointed, but those people are supposed to do all the fine nitty-gritty stuff. But I think what the problem is those agencies are also becoming political as well, which is not supposed to happen. They're supposed to be nonpartisan, and they're supposed to be focused solely on the boring stuff. And sadly, it's sort of going off the rails a little bit with that. It seems like recently in modern history, not any particular party, I'm not trying to get into that. It's just sort of like just the status quo in the modern era, that's the way it is. But those agencies are responsible for this stuff, and they're the ones who are asleep at the wheel. And that's really what needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I would have to say so. It's a sad state of affairs these days, and I will be honest with y'all, it's infuriating to watch, because when you actually take a step back for a minute and you think about things rationally, you see that the entire thing is a clown show, at least in the government at the moment. And I'm talking not in all the bureaucracies. Because I got to say this, big shout out to Amtrak. Amtrak's doing big things these days. I just got to say that. Big shout out to Amtrak. They're on the right path. But for everyone else, it's a hellhole up there. I don't know what it is. It's like nothing but clowns at the helm, and every single 4 to 8 years we just elect in a new series of clowns, and nothing really changes. Like it's small things that change. It's small potatoes. You don't see anything anymore like Teddy Roosevelt come in and he starts founding national parks. He has the Food and Drug Act passed. He starts building up America's military might to actually be one that's well represented in the world, and one that can actually broker peaces and get involved in global affairs and global trade and really start to blow this economy up. You don't see things like that anymore. You don't see things that you would say look out for the interests of every American to make sure that the system's fair, like Teddy Roosevelt said with a square deal. You don't see square deals anymore. You just see lopsided deals. It either goes all one way or all the other way, and then no one even focuses on the square deals that you're supposed to be paying attention to in the middle, where people are just having a decent quality of life. The things that the government is supposed to be generally assuring because they took it on as a burden about a century ago, like making sure there's clean drinking water. But anyways, with that, I hope that covers that the best we can. We got to make sure to get into some questions here. And also, someone said, "Wow, what party was Teddy Roosevelt one from?" Look, the Republican Party of 1900 and the Democrat Party of 1900 are totally different than the ones you see today. You may as well be talking about a different time in history, a completely different group of people back then on both sides, because it's not, and that's one thing I don't like either, is that when modern political parties call back to the greats of the past, because the truth is that the parties of today on both sides are nowhere close at all to being close to what those people were back in the day. It was a totally different breed of people, for good and for worse, than what we have today. That's why I don't like it when one party will go, "We're the party of Lincoln." It's like, listen, it's like, this is not the party of Lincoln these days. Like, what Lincoln, it's like, some of the things Lincoln did that were good and bad, totally different than what y'all would accept nowadays. And then on the other side, you got them going, I can't. We're the party of FDR. It's like, FDR was totally different than the party of present day. Makes no sense to even call back to him. It's like, it doesn't. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so we are now, and also, folks, please note party politics in the chat. We're not discussing party politics. That's the rule that we have. We don't discuss that. We're simply discussing the structure of the government. At least let's leave it at that. But anyways, jumping into our first super chat, the last segment, we have no more polls to address for the night. This one goes to Waba, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Waba, for that support. He said, sorry, I've been slacking lately.
Hey, no biggie, Wubba. There's no such thing as slacking because no one has to support the channel. I always hate it when I hear people say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've been slacking." No, don't worry. You can sit back and relax and just watch the show. There's no pressure at all to support it. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. We wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so, a big thanks to you once again, and thank you so much for really enjoying it and finding it worthwhile to support, even regularly at some points. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to William P., who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, William, as well for that support. He said, I'm surprised that their strikers don't have RPG cages and that the crown armor with camo nets on top like ours did in Iraq.
You know, it is weird to note that, William. I think they removed the armor cage that would protect from an RPG a little bit better. I think they removed it for weight-saving measures on the ones that we sent over because it doesn't seem like any of them were equipped with it. And from what I understand, that worked well, but it did wear the vehicle down, and especially in muddy conditions, which they never really had to deal with in Afghanistan or Iraq, this would end up maybe bogging the vehicle down to it being so heavy it would get stuck in a Rasputitsa later on. So they decided to just not send those and send them without the RPG cage and the other additional modifications. Possibly. I can't really explain it, though. That's maybe the best thing I can explain is that it was a weight-saving measure just because they were scared of the vehicle getting overweight for the kind of ground conditions it may deal with in the future. But we'll never really know. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. A huge shout out to you once again, William P., for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. A huge thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Sarge, as always, for that support. He said, I just cracked a cold one, meaning a beer. And that's good. He said, for the 35th, I might have to crack a cold one myself sometime. But he said, initiate, lead, and make an example and win. And I am Yisrael Chai. And also, did Poland threaten Belarus? Because I heard rumors, that's why they backed off.
And thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Pigment. I hope you're enjoying that cold one that you just cracked. And also, huge shout out to the 35th once again. I still actually have your patch on the desk. I keep it around because I think it looks really neat. And I thank you so much for saying that. That was an incredibly kind gift of you. And also, to answer that question, I did not hear about the Polish threatening the Belarusians. I think the Belarusians backed off probably because of threats from inside of their own country from the military commanders. That may have been why, but we've never really gotten an official explanation as to why the 180 flip-flop again from Lukashenko. But I'm doubting it was the Polish because the Polish are generally being told to back off by America in the background from what we've seen as a reoccurring trend these days. And so that's about the best I could explain it at the moment. But with that, I thank you so much once again for support, LSA Sergeant Pigment, and being an absolute channel legend and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so a huge shout out and a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Kif, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Kif, as well. They said, I look forward to your news updates while I'm working my night shift here in the UK. And take one from the chat.
Hey, and thank you so much, Kif, for being one of our British viewers. And I'm glad that you're able to get a little bit of worth out of this thing in the time frame it runs, because you get to enjoy it on the night shift, working the night shift. But still, I got to say, thank you so much once again for the support. Thank you for being one of our British viewers. And we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And the one from the chat is going to go to, let's see here, John Person, who said, what do you think the repercussions would be if Belarus actually does attack Ukraine?
It would be pretty bad. From what I understand, it would be pretty rough. Because while the Belarusians are poorly trained and they're not really that well equipped, if they were able to send over 30,000 combat troops, really supported by the entirety of the remainder of the Belarusian army, it would pose a major problem for Ukraine, because this would be a major front that is now developed in this area. Ukraine would have to find ways to divert troops here, and they really don't have a lot of strategic reserves, so they would end up having to draw from the areas around Vovchansk, from inside of Kursk, and also from the southern front, and then start diverting a lot of forces north into Kyiv. This means that in most areas, the Ukrainians would start to be heavily outnumbered, and not only that, some areas would be completely devoid of troops, meaning that the Russians would be able to start advancing, and that could really be a death knell for Ukraine being able to hold out in this war until the Russians gave up. And so, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, because that's largely how it kind of would end up turning out, at least in my opinion. So if they did invade, it would look pretty bad, at least from what I would know. But still, a huge shout out to Kif once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And also, let's see, how can we run if we can't? And also, that's a good point. I had to read that because, Matthew, you responded to "You're Taking My Life." That's exactly my point that I've been trying to make on this channel for a while. And it seems like my point in that is in the minority, especially out there in the world these days, because I say things that are positive. I say that, like, that's really the big thing in between me and everyone else here on this platform, really Matthew and me and everyone else on the platform, is that we say things that are positive. You know, like, well, now I did go on a bit of a negative rant here about how this country is being run these days, but whenever I talk about the people in this country, I always say great things about every single one of them. I never demonize one group or the other, and that's because there's no one to demonize over here. Everyone in America is a pretty decent, upstanding person. There are some bad eggs, but there's not a lot of them, and they're generally outliers, and the laws of this country ensure that eventually they'll be found and charged for their crimes that they're conducting. But beyond that, everyone in this country is very well intentioned. They're always trying to do what they think is best for everyone, and you've got to respect Americans for that. You also got to respect Americans for being some of the hardest working people in the world. For the amount of hours that Americans work on average, we generally outwork most other countries out there in the first world. And while that can be good in some ways and bad in others, you really got to respect Americans for their work ethic. You also got to respect them for generally being really nice people when you run into them. Until politics is brought up, Americans are incredibly nice and hospitable folks. And you really got to respect a lot of people for that, because you don't see that in some other countries out there, even in the first world. And I got a lot of respect and admiration for Americans across the country, where they live in the cities or the countryside, wherever they may be. I believe that all of those Americans have very good intentions. They're very good people, and they work really hard to try and have a better life for themselves, their families, and really the nation at large, whether they know it or not. The thing I don't like, though, is that these great, well-intentioned people are having their good intentions overrun by non-well-intentioned people from abroad and also here at home that are trying to weaponize their good intentions against another group of Americans and try and have them targeted and treat each other hostilely, if not violently, whenever they run into each other in public and they publicly profess their differing opinions. That's one thing I'm not a fan of at all in this country these days. And I absolutely hate to see it, because one thing that Americans should always understand is that the only friends you have in this world are other Americans. There are no foreign countries that are your friends. Now our Europeans here in the chat, they are our friends, they're our allies, and so are the Canadians and the Australians and the Japanese and the Koreans. But the Chinese and the Russians will never be America's friend. They just cannot be. There's a differing sphere of influence going on there, which means that we would have to give for them to actually be our friend, and we would have to end up being a minor power that is far weaker than we are right now, and we would be living a much worse life because of that. Because you don't get the benefits of being a world-leading power being a minor member of a sphere. You just never do. Especially in a Chinese or a Russian-led sphere. You just don't. And so that's what I really think people ought to understand in this country, is that folks should not be trying to push for authoritarianism, which is a really big push that's going on both sides these days. Authoritarianism is the death of this nation, and the nation that people actually adore and enjoy. And on top of that, other Americans, regardless of their beliefs, they're not your enemies. They're just people you disagree with. The real enemies of this country are overseas in Russia and China, and they will take any advantage they can, even people's well-intentioned kindness, and turn that into anger and hatred if it means that they can tear down America from the inside. That's what it
That's
is.
what I don't get. That's what I don't get because to me, people are people. We all want the same things. We want to live a good life. We want to be safe from, enemies attacking us and things like that. We want to be safe on the street, and also we want to have the ability to make a living. It's like rather than that, it's like there are things that are up for debate, but at what point do we start hating and wanting to hurt each other over some issues? I mean, some issues are important to people. I get that. But I've seen things in the live chat. Obviously, I have my own political beliefs. We don't get into that on the channel. But y'all have said some things. Some people said some things in the chat that I disagree with. I don't start hating people for it. I just think, well, maybe they have like a reason to believe that I'm not aware of or something like that. Maybe one day outside the channel where we don't discuss politics, maybe I'll figure it out. But these days, it seems like people are so ready to go to each other's throats for whatever reason. They're just so angry for some reason. I don't even know why that is because even with the issues we have, the United States is still the best quality of life in the entire world, even with the issues that we have. And people act like we're living in shit, to be perfectly honest with you, when we're not. It's like I just don't get it. It's just a lot of anger, and people are taking it out and using politics as the route to sort of create enemies out of each other.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, and that's one thing I just hate to see. I'm just not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of it at all, and I don't like that people hop onto it so easily. Like to give a little bit of a moment here, kind of like an aside, like a state of the union of a sort about YouTube. Pretty much everyone in the community here in the Ukraine war has ended up publicly professing a sharp political leaning and then demonizing the other side that's not a part of their leaning, which I'm heavily against because it's once again like I don't even know what it is at this point. It's almost ending up becoming grassroots. People just want to like hate on other folks. I just don't get it. Like, yeah, I have my own personal opinions, and I think many of y'all can get the idea. I probably generally disagree with really anyone, because there's a small group of people who say things like I do. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit there and hate these people because I disagree with them. That makes no sense. And it's just a simple disagreement. At the end of the day, everyone's still living in America. It's not like a civil war is going to happen. Everyone's going to be killing each other, and God forbid a civil war does. Because I think a lot of people who are begging for a civil war this day, these days, which is really half of everyone, they'll end up finding out civil wars are not at all fun or enjoyable, and they're not at all any kind of great thing where you finally end up getting to win on over the other side. Everyone loses in a civil war, and the end result would be some sort of an authoritarian government that would end up putting down their own people that supported them to in their rise to power at the end of the day. Just look at the Nazis and the Soviets, and the Chinese for that matter. Look at every single Bolshevik, look at every single Nazi, look at every single communist Chinese that ended up supporting their rise to power. Look what happened to them. I mean, they all ended up dying horrific deaths or getting put in the gulags or ended up getting executed on Hitler's personal orders sometimes. Like, those authoritarian powers are not anything that people should be yearning for. And I see that a lot these days, especially on Twitter. Like, people from all sides will go, like, one side, for some reason, really loves the communist Chinese authoritarianism, and the other side really loves the Russian Federation's form of authoritarianism. And I feel like people should just equally understand. You're saying that from the convenience of a country that does not have an authoritarian government. If you lived in one of those forms of governments, you would hate it. So don't wish for it, because it's not anything you'd want to wish for. And so with that, I hope I covered that once again fairly well. You're taking my life. You brought up a good point there, and I thought I'd expound on a little bit. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Classic Logic, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Classic Logic, for that support. It said, I can't speak for anyone else, but I watch this channel due to you guys being so up to date on what's going on, and plus lots of high energy. And I love the way that you guys do the news and question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Classic Logic, and thank you so much for saying that you watch this channel due to us being up to date. And we try and be as up to date as we can be. We actually try and look at the news all the way up till the hour of the stream, and even while we're live. because it is a lot. It says a lot when you're actually on top of things and you're actually covering things that are really happening today, because a lot of people don't really do that, and a lot of people kind of just like try and like glide their way through and make it really easy. But we like to put in that extra effort so that way we are as up to date as we can possibly be, and we're actually getting y'all the news that y'all want to hear. And so a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. Thank you for the kind words, and we will make sure to get a question from the chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And this question goes to the nephew, who says, why has Ukraine not gotten the big bridge yet, the Kursk?
They haven't. We don't really know why they haven't gotten it yet. Maybe because they're still waiting for it to really be the Russians' sole form of transportation through this area. That may be what they're waiting for. Because at the moment, we still understand that they're kind of shifting over into using the Kerch Bridge entirely, and they want to cause as much disruption as possible. So that may be why they're still waiting. But we really don't have a good answer beyond that. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Live, Laugh, Toaster Bath, the channel legend, who put in a 15 Australian. And thank you very much, Live, Laugh, Toaster, for that support as always. They said, good evening, Enforcers, and good evening to you. They said, have we had any updates about the Patriots from Israel that were to be provided to Ukraine and LSA?
And thank you so much for the support, Live, Laugh, Toaster, Bath. And that is a great question. Let's see, have we had any updates about the Patriots from Israel that were provided? We have not. We have heard that they've never made it there. We're actually hearing that the Israelis are planning on just burying them somewhere in Israel and just abandoning them instead of sending them to Ukraine. And we really haven't gotten any updates beyond that. So we still think they're on their path to do something along those lines. But we're not entirely sure if that's going to happen all the way. That's just what we've heard. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, let's see here. I'm seeing someone say something about the top 10 list of the countries.
Oh, well,
they said,
I think I said, I'm not sure if we said we have the greatest quality of life. I think I said that we have some things that are a lot better, like harder working folks here in the first world, at least, than you really see in most other first world countries. I said some things like that, but America doesn't technically fall in most people's charts in the top 10 in living conditions anymore. But I have to say with that, though, on some of that, it has a bit of a political caveat to it. Like, for example, just to bring up a couple of things, I'm not going to say which way I lean on these things, but sometimes it's marked against the United States that we do not have, like, for example, public universal health care or something like that, and then that's marked against us and we go down a notch on the list. Or it could be something else along those lines, either healthcare-wise or something else, but and then other things aren't ever factored in on those lists. Like, for example, the average size of an American house is generally 2 times the size of an average house in Europe. Like, that's something that's never really factored into the whole quality of life thing. Other things that they kind of feel like creature comforts, but these days are kind of becoming a necessity even in Europe. Like, for example, air conditioners being a common attachment to really every American house. That's something that you won't really find a lot in Europe. Like, for example, I believe it's something like 90% of all structures inside of the United Kingdom do not have air conditioners. And that doesn't seem that weird, like when you say that. But the thing is that nowadays with rising temperatures, and especially the heat waves that have been hitting the UK recently, a decent amount of people are dying from heat stroke inside of their houses due to a lack of air conditioners. And so on that quality, I would say that the quality of life in Britain could take a knock down the list compared to the United States because of something like that. But sometimes in the quality of life assessments, things like that aren't really considered. So while I would say this, we are certainly not in the top 10. But it isn't as bad as people make it out to be. And I think, and I don't think that's at all a defeatist thing to say that we're not in the top 10, because, I generally would say, however you measure it, whether it has a little bit of a political lean to what you're factoring in or not, or, whether you're factoring in the nitty gritty, like average house sizes, the amenities in a house or anything like that, there are things that I believe we fall short on in America. There's a decent amount of things, and I feel like it's pretty okay to say something like this because no one really talks about it. The lack of public transportation, like really nice and convenient public transportation in America, is non-existent, especially in the American Southeast. Now, up in the Northeast, they have that generally ironed out incredibly well, all the way down to around Virginia. But everywhere south of Virginia and all the way out to about Texas, there's like no public transportation in this area. Like if you're near an Amtrak route, you're blessed, and beyond that, there's like nothing else. And I find that to be a little bit odd because public transportation's always been a thing in America up until recently, like up until about the past 70 years. Like we always had electric trolley cars, we always had train services interconnecting to other areas. We always had some kind of way for people to get around without them having to own a car. Like it's not like and of course some people are going to start saying, "Oh, wait a minute, are you against private car industry?" No, if people want to own a car, they can own a car, but I think that you should have some equally viable alternative options if you wanted it. That's something that I would think would be nice to have. I think it would also be nice for the government to subsidize a decent amount of the running costs so that way the fares could be cheaper on that kind of stuff. So that way it was an actual viable and competitive alternative to buying or owning a car. You don't see that here in the Southeast. You'll see that in some places. Like Texas actually has some pretty interesting amounts of public transportation. They're still working on developing some. And the Northeast always had a large amount of public transportation because historically it was the most populated area in America up until about the past 70 years. And then California really kind of overtook it along with Texas. But I feel like those kinds of things are a good thing. And I also saw someone say public transportation is socialism. How? How is that socialism? Because we had that forever in this country. Like we had that when we had like unregulated capitalism. Like hell, Standard Oil like owned the country in the 1900s, and we still had public transportation. I mean, that's the crazy thing. People don't know this. Like the trolley cars you see in San Francisco and New Orleans, they aren't outliers. They were the norm. Like there were trolley cars in every single city in America. You could get literally anywhere, and there was public transportation to get there. And then it was all stripped up in the 50s because of how things went at the time, and then it just ceased to exist. And no one ever thought about replacing it because people just got in the cars and they went, well, why replace it? Everyone's in the cars now. And that makes no sense. It makes no sense to equate a public institution like that to socialism. Like, I don't see the connection there because historically there is no connection. It's like saying access to clean water from the tap is socialism. It's like, that's not really socialism. That's just ensuring that the government upkeeps some basic public facilities that would be beneficial to the public at large, at least in my opinion. But anyways, with that, also, sorry, Anthony, we can't read sarcasm and stuff like that. When you said that, I was like, what the hell do you mean? Because we can't read sarcasm and stuff like that. But also other things, like, I don't know why it's like, I'm really going on rants tonight a lot, but I don't know why, like, just talking about our state, because this is something that a lot of states will deal with. Why in the world is it that cities care no longer about sanitation? Like, what is the problem with that? Because, back in the day, like, people always used to think that back in the day it was always, like, dingy and nasty and everything. But usually, like, the cities would pay for a public sanitation works to exist for people to literally just go around and sweep the streets and keep them clean. Like, that doesn't exist anymore. Like, you have, like, waste companies that pick up your trash, but you don't have anyone going around, at least in the downtown areas, and just making sure it stays clean. Like, you don't have that anymore. Like, what happened to that? Like, why in the world did that go? We need that back. Because it just made life better. Like, why in the world do cities will invest in parks now, but they just don't invest in, like, general purpose parks? There's always, like, a playground or something for, like, little kids. It's like, why not just have a park that everyone can enjoy? Like a green, like a well-kept green every few blocks or something like that. Just for quality of life improvement. Because these things were all at the forefront of America back in the late 1800s. That's why New York City has Central Park. If it wasn't for that movement, they wouldn't have one of the most famous parks in the world. If it wasn't for that movement, you wouldn't really see a lot of the major parks or at least even minor parks in some cities in America that exist now. You wouldn't see them because that movement wouldn't have existed. But it was for that movement that we even see parks at all. And it's like, it would be nice to see things like that, to go through a city, or to go through anything for that matter, even smaller towns, and be like, these are some nice, well-kept places. I feel happy being here. And people don't focus on that anymore. They always focus on the abstract, things that aren't actually tangible and things that actually don't improve life that you can see or that you can actually feel as a person. It's always these really abstract, removed things that only affect small niche groups of people. And when I say that, I'm not saying that in like a ethnic sort of a sense. I'm saying that in like the amount of people across the entire nation, no matter who they are or where they are, it affects a very, very small amount of them. And those are the things that are brought to the forefront, and no one ever focuses on anything else. Like that. That's my opinion. That's my take on it. And also, Van Cameron said, "Bro wants the '80s back." Hell no, I don't want the '80s back. The '80s was terrible. Do you know what the Bronx looked like in the '80s? Like that place was literally like falling apart. Like I don't know if anyone knows that the Bronx literally was like collapsing in the '80s. Like they had to go through and pretty much demolish a lot of it. It looked like a hellhole. It looked like a war zone, honestly. So no, I do not want to go back to the '80s. I really don't want to go back to any time. I want to make this time our time. I want to make it a time that people look back at and they say that was a good time in history. Different than the others, but still a good one. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Another nice, good rabbit hole right there to be sure, but hopefully a welcome one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Jason Carney, who puts in a $24 donation. And thank you very much, Jason, for that support. I do not see a comment attached to it, but thank you very much for supporting the channel. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the support, Jason Carney, and helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support does mean a lot and helps us to keep this channel running. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, Joseph, the news is over. We're in the question segment right now, so it's like endless rabbit holes and endless soup and salad until the end of the show. So if you want to see the news, just rewind to the beginning, and I think the news ended about 50 minutes ago at around the hour and 40-minute mark. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Duncan VR, who puts in a $12 donation. And thank you, Duncan, for always supporting the channel as well. He says, Bamuba, moo, woo, quack. He said, Enforcer, let's talk about the 19th century British locomotives. He said, I'm trying to help Matt fall asleep. LOL. Moo, bah, quack. Oh, man, that fly's a real blah, stead the marmot. Blah, meow.
And I thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I would talk about 19th century British steam locomotives, but I really don't know a lot about them. Kind of my entire focus on railroads, for the large part, is in Britain from the 1910s onwards. And in America, really from the inception of the railroad here in our country up until the present day. Because considering that in the rest of the Western world, it's kind of y'all's problem and y'all's issue. Like in Britain right now, they're having this huge argument whether they should nationalize the railroads again or not. It's kind of, well, that actually is kind of a political thing, but it's such a niche thing, most people probably don't even care. But the thing is that back in the day in Britain, from the 1950s up until the late 1980s, the railroads in Britain were nationalized, meaning that the central government, pretty much Parliament, the British government, Her Majesty's government, whatever you want to call it, was running the railroads. And so it was good in a way because the fares were pretty decent, but it was bad in a way because it was mismanaged a lot. And people hate mismanagement. Like, they hate it so much. And so then in the late 80s and the 90s, they ended up privatizing the rails in Britain. So where the national government owned all of the rails throughout the entirety of the United Kingdom, but the companies that ran the trains on those rails were private entities running for profit. And so nowadays, in Britain, there's been this crazy thing where the price hike keeps happening with the tickets on the trains. Like, the tickets are absurd. You really can't go anywhere in Britain anymore without losing an arm and a leg paying for the rail fare. And so now they're starting to go, well, maybe it would be better to nationalize, to knock down all the rail fares again. But then, you have the problems with the mismanagement and all that again. It's kind of like a trade. It's kind of a trade-off of a sort. But in the meantime, talking about railroads here in America, and of course, I also want to make this very clear. While I explain the situation with privatization or nationalization in the UK, I see like the pluses and the minuses for both sides. So I'm not picking a side there. I'm just explaining the situation. So that way, if any British people were thinking, "Oh, you're getting political," I'm not getting political. Not with Britain. That's y'all's thing, and y'all will figure that out. And whatever happens, happens with that. But here in America, I got to say, Amtrak's actually doing better. Like, they're actually extending their route map. And let me see Amtrak extended route map. Let's see here. Let me see if I can show you all the new route map that they have coming out here. Here we go. Yeah, here it is. Oh, it's so cool, Matthew. This is really cool. So this was the map that they published, let's see here. I think it was about a year ago. Somewhere around there. About all of the new rail routes that they're going to be opening in America. And it's really interesting.
These are the ones that they're going to open, or they're already open?
All the ones in dark blue are the ones that are already open. The ones in light blue are the new routes they're going to open, and the ones in yellow means that they're going to be enhancing the services, meaning that there's going to be a higher frequency of the trains traveling through those areas.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm curious about this. Is Amtrak, is it a entirely nationalized system, or is it private, is in some way?
I believe it's an entirely private system. It's a federal company. It does have, I think, other shareholders, but the majority shareholder will always be the U.S. government. So it's largely funded and operated by the federal government because Amtrak was created under the Rail Act, the National Rail Act of 1975, which nationalized all passenger rail services throughout the entirety of the United States, taking them from the companies like Santa Fe, Union Pacific, Louisville and Nashville. Let's see. Penn Central at that time, which had just collapsed. But they took all of the rail services from those people and they put them all under one roof, which was the federal government's roof. And so from there, the federal government has kind of had a lot of control on how everything goes with Amtrak. They tell them what new routes they'll have. They kind of give them their funding because Amtrak's never made a profit, sadly. They were getting really close before the Wuhan Whirlybird came. I mean, they were literally close to profitability. Like if it had just gone another year without the Wuhan Whirlybird, they probably would have made it into profitability for the first time ever. But because of the Wuhan Whirlybird, they are probably never going to reach profitability for like 6 or 7 years now, and that's kind of sad. But that is what it is. But they've got
the reason why I was asking that is because I was about to say that unless the mindset behind the train system, and not just Amtrak, but any train system that's highly nationalized or subsidized by the federal government, is if they don't have full autonomy to basically chase money, because that's ultimately what motivates people. We can't get beyond that. It's money that motivates people. And unless they know they can turn a profit if they provide a better service, I don't think the service is ever going to rival that of like European trains or anything like that, because Amtrak just simply doesn't put the effort, honestly, into the train system that it needs to be to take it to the next level. And part of it is because they simply can't get the railroads, outside the freight licenses or whatever. They're having to like basically share the railroads with the freight companies, and the freight companies have the right of way. So that's a huge disaster right there with that. So, unless it's a private company doing the trains, I'm not sure if it's ever going to be on par with what the premium services are inside of Europe.
Well, that's what you say, but there is an area where that's proven wrong, and that's the Northeastern Corridor in between Washington, D.C. to Boston. Amtrak actually owns all of the rails in between Washington, D.C. to Boston on the Northeastern Corridor, and from what the numbers come out every single year, about 90 to 92% of all of the trains in the Northeastern Corridor that run every single day, which there are, I believe, hundreds of services that run on the Northeast Corridor daily, they're all on time nearly, which is pretty impressive, a 92% on time rate. You don't really run into rates that high unless if you're in Europe or in Japan, where the rates are the highest. It's like 99% on time in Japan. But beyond that, in that area where they own the rails and they really get to prioritize their trains, they're always on time for the most part, and it's an actual well-oiled running machine. It's the only part of their entire network that is profitable, at least as a standalone. But everything outside of that is unprofitable, because Matthew actually touched on it fairly well. Everything else on this map, outside of this one line from Boston that goes to Providence and then to New York and then down to Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, this is the only part they actually own. Everything else outside of that's owned by a private company. So in the East Coast, everything east of the Mississippi is owned either by CSX or Norfolk Southern. And everything west of the Mississippi is owned either by BNSF or it's owned by Union Pacific, because there are 4 major companies in this nation that run America's railroads. And so all of these massive routes that you see going from Chicago to elsewhere, like, let's see here, this would be the Southwest Chief right here that heads from Chicago to LA. This would be the Sunset Limited, I believe it is, that goes from LA to New Orleans. The Coast Starlight goes from LA to Seattle. The Empire Builder goes from Chicago to Seattle through the north. And then the California Zephyr goes from Chicago to, I believe it's Sacramento or San Francisco, one or the other, and it terminates there. All of these major routes, which are called Amtrak's legacy routes, they all run on the freight company's rails. And because of that, the freight companies end up largely prioritizing their own trains to move down those tracks, meaning that Amtrak services on these long distance legacy routes rarely ever run on time, meaning that there's generally a decent amount of unprofitability on Amtrak's in there. And not only that, they're not really competitive as a viable form of long distance travel because, one, it's fairly expensive, and two, they're never really on time. So you can't really build a reliable schedule around them because by the time you get to the very end of the route, you could be 2 hours late. For all you know, because you were held up by freight trains the entire way. So largely,
So, to me, it's not really about necessarily being on time. When you think about going on Amtrak, I'm not trying to knock Amtrak because I don't think it's terrible or anything like that. But without competition, because Amtrak really has no competition, it doesn't spur excellence, basically. And when you think about getting on an Amtrak train, you don't think necessarily about, you're about to have a first class experience. You don't think that. At least me personally, I don't. I just think you're going to get on a train. It's going to be somewhat okay. There might be a couple things that are not clean here and there, to be honest. They're a little bit dirty. And it's going to be an okay train ride, but nothing to write home about. That's immediately what comes to mind when I think about Amtrak. And, over in Japan, you get on a train, they're super clean, they're always on time, and there's always a reason to think, oh, I really want to ride that train because it's like a world-class experience. I want to experience that. Amtrak should really upgrade their train cars a lot more than they currently are even. I know they've renovated them, but that's really not good enough. They honestly just need new train cars, really. Like, really decked out, really nice. Speed them up with faster trains, so even if they're delayed a little bit by the freight, they can try to speed up with, a faster train, if that's even possible. But
speed also restrictions.
Well, maybe they could work something out, I'm sure, like to get the speed increased a little bit, maybe. But if not, then that's okay. But they should also focus on being focused mainly on the guests. So, like a first class experience, like everybody's treated like they're first classing on the train and not like you're just getting on like a public bus or something like that. It should be special when you get on the train because people have to have a reason to ride the train because it's not a popular method of transport for many reasons. And to get people back on the trains, it's going to have to be special to make people want to get on it. And Amtrak really doesn't provide that right now in the current state.
I would say it's a tough one. It's a tough one because the thing is that you're saying we should make the trains faster. You can only make them so fast before you hit speed limits. And unlike speed limits on the highway where you can go, it's 70, I'll go 80. You can't really do that in the train because the speed limits are literally the maximum limit. Like if you go any faster than that, you're going to end up derailing or you're going to end up flipping over the locomotive in the car. So you can't just go, oh, that freight train held me up. Now I'm going to whip it up to 70, although the speed limit's 50, because then you're going to end up getting people killed probably, and that won't be a good look for Amtrak or really anyone. So what you would have
Well,
to
at least
do,
at least if the train wasn't on time, at least if the service was first class, you could at least overlook it a little bit. Maybe you could think, well, the service was so good, the people were so nice on the train, it was so clean and modern and nice. I'll overlook the fact that the train wasn't the fastest in the world, and I'll still come back and do it again. But when you have so many things stacked against it, like the slow train, the service not being that great. I mean, there's friendly people that work on Amtrak. Don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing them or anything, but it's not exactly first class service, if you know what I mean. Kind of like a bad airline, kind of like American Airlines or something like that. It's not exactly first class, but it works. And also the trains are not super modern either. Even the renovations were kind of like sort of honestly half-assed done a little bit. They've reupholstered some seats, but that's about it. And with the amount of money the government has to fund Amtrak, they should really have new trains and new train cars at this point, instead of just trying to basically renovate old, nasty train cars. And also, just the whole thing needs to be upgraded, man. It needs to be first class.
I would say here's my proposition for everyone on how I would try and fix it. Obviously, running an end-to-end service across the United States will never work because the airline will dominate over the entirety of the Midwest. There's no way to make a train go fast enough in that area where it could compete with a plane. That's just the honest truth. So, knowing that, of course, rail service would still be provided through the Midwest on the legacy routes like they are right now. But Amtrak would buy and own all of the rails through the West Coast, so Washington, Oregon, and California, along with Nevada, and also Arizona as well, kind of this entire area. Those would be the western rail corridor, and it would have nothing but high-speed rail running through it because the population density is high enough through most of this area, and also in some smaller elements of Arizona and Nevada, you could actually run profitable high-speed rail sections through these areas, and they would be far more competitive than the plane, because including the check-in time of the airports and everything, you would actually be getting from your start and end destinations quicker on the train than you would by plane. So that would actually end up working on the West Coast. Then on the East Coast, from everything all the way up to Boston and all the way down to Florida and about as far west as the Mississippi River, you can end up creating high-speed corridors and higher-speed corridors through this area. High speed all the way down the East Coast, but higher speed through everything else. So when I say high speed, I mean up to speeds of about 186 miles per hour. So Avalia Liberty is running pretty much the entirety of the East Coast from Boston down to Miami. But everything outside of pretty much the eastern seaboard, it gets higher speed services. So services up to 120 miles per hour, because it wouldn't be economically viable to build high speed rail corridors through places like Georgia. Well, not like places like Georgia, but like places like Atlanta. Well, actually, no, Atlanta would actually be pretty much the end, if I remember correctly, of the high-speed service, about 186 miles per hour, because it would go from Charlotte to Atlanta. But from there, from Atlanta to Birmingham and down to New Orleans, it wouldn't make economic sense to run a high-speed train through there. There just wouldn't be enough ridership and population density, so you'd run a higher-speed rail service of about 120 miles per hour. But that would be my opinion on how that could end up running. These routes would have no change. Texas would have changes. They actually would be a high-speed corridor in between Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, kind of like in a giant triangle. But beyond that, you can't really support high-speed or higher-speed rail services throughout the entirety of the Midwest. Just not enough population density, and it's too big of an area, so you would still run the legacy routes. But that's how I would end up trying to fix the railroad system in America, where it would actually make sense for people to want to get on and ride it. Not only that, but Amtrak would be guaranteed government subsidies, much like the airlines get nowadays, so that way they can bump down their fares, so that way they're actually affordable. Because that's kind of a problem that a lot of people run into with Amtrak as well, is that the government doesn't give them a consistent amount of subsidies, like we do with airlines. Because I'm telling you all this, economy class flying about $200 one way from Birmingham to Washington, D.C., well, actually it's like $174 per person. That is not an accurate price. Like, it actually would cost about $400 or $500 or even more to get you from one point to the other on that trip if the ticket was unsubsidized. The government subsidizes airline companies a great deal, and that's why their airfares are so low. You'll also see with air freight, which is not subsidized a lot by the government, that's where you end up getting your damn shirt eaten by the company. Because when we tried to send that drone to Ukraine, to Poland, to send that tiny little package with that drone in it, which ended up getting lost, which was wonderful. It cost $500 to send that tiny package. And that package weighed, I think it was something like 10 or 11 pounds. It was something like that. It wasn't that heavy, but it cost $500 to ship it. And it's like, you're not telling me that it costs $500 for this 11-pound package to get all the way to Poland, but one person can fly from Atlanta to the UK for about $1,000. It's like, that doesn't even make economic sense, because the person is far more heavier, and that's because the tickets are subsidized by the national government for the large part, and that's why the fares are so cheap. You can do that to the railroads and make it wildly cheap to ride, not only in coach class, but in first class in a roomette or a bedroom. But anyways, we're going down a massive rabbit hole here. Some people are like, dang, man, I'm getting lost here. Maybe, but I'm really big into this kind of stuff. I'm big into energy infrastructure, water infrastructure, road infrastructure, rail infrastructure. I'm not really that big into airline infrastructure, because to be honest, we've gotten that ironed out to about the best you can get it, although there is some strain going on there at the moment. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And also, I saw Laser say, I love these rabbit holes. Thank you for loving them. I love going through them. I know this isn't really our topic on like what we cover on, you know, like with the war and everything, but I actually do love to talk about this stuff, because I really get a big enjoyment out of actually talking about things that would affect people, you know, that y'all would actually be able to do and enjoy every single day. And Angel R said, this is strange.
Well, let's see what the audience has to say about it, because we're running a poll right now that says if Amtrak could improve one aspect to attract more passengers, what would be the best improvement to do right now to attract the more passengers? So 42% said speeding up the service and making it on time, while 30% said make the service first class for all, and 8% said really nothing because trains suck in general and it's not a good form of transport. And I would have to say that I don't think trains will ever, rival the airlines, because if you're looking to get somewhere fast, the airline is naturally going to be the fastest way to do it. So that's always going to have the advantage. So if you want to ride the train for whatever reason, for like scenic reasons or simply because you want the train experience, I would say that by making it first class, that would attract plenty more passengers to go on the train. If it was first class like the European services or like the Japanese service, that would attract many, many more people. And they wouldn't mind paying the price either, because if you're on a sightseeing tour, you will pay more money than a commuter would who wants to take the cheapest flight possible. So I think that's the best way to do it. And people that are on scenic routes, they don't want to go super fast because they want to see the surrounding sights. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say probably first class service, because we have to remember, when keeping them on time's great, but considering that the average runtime of the Empire Builder from Chicago to Seattle is 65 hours, a 2 hour late period would not be that big of a deal when we're really talking about it. Like, it's a big deal, sure, but I don't think it would draw in a lot of people, because they're still going to go, dang, that's 65 hours. I could just hop on a plane and fly from Chicago to Seattle in 5. And then, getting in and out of the airport, that would add a couple of other hours. So it would really be like 8 hours from Chicago to Seattle. No biggie. So with that, keeping them on time on the legacy routes wouldn't help that much. Really what that would be, if you made it all first class and you really just like up those to a T. You're like, it's a first class rail service. It's a once in a lifetime experience. Kind of like taking a cruise kind of a deal. Like make the train very luxurious, make it very enjoyable, and make it more focused on the sightseeing side of things than actual viable transportation. You could probably draw in a lot of people for the long range legacy routes traveling from Chicago out west. But for everything else on the inside of California and inside of the eastern area of the country, you would really have to up the speed of the services over here, because there is enough population density. It's not about sightseeing at that point. It is actual effective transportation trying to get from point A to point B. So in this area, it should be prioritized to keep the trains on time. While in the Midwest to the west, it should be prioritized to make it more of a luxury experience that people are trying to enjoy kind of as a standalone vacation more than a viable form of transport. But with that, also, let's see. Oh, Avari. Oh my goodness. You would think that's a good idea. So to read this for y'all, Avari said the best trains would allow you to efficiently bring your personal vehicle with you. Maybe not a car as we know it, but something you can operate from the station. Oh, Avari, they got it. It's called the it's the auto rack Amtrak service. No, the auto train. Sorry, it's the auto train. Auto train Amtrak. Here we go. Amtrak actually does run a service like this. They have something called Auto Train, which is where you can take your car with you on the train. It travels from south of New York all the way down to Miami. So it's kind of like the Snowbird train of a sort. But they have this, but the problem is that it is an abysmal failure. Because you think, like, this sounds like a great idea on paper, but the problem is that this train is usually late because there's always a loading issue with getting the cars into the auto racks, and for that reason, it's almost never on time. And so people don't really want to take it. But still, it is one of the best ways to get, if you're like from the New York area, to get you and your car down to Miami, and be able to drive around with your car down there without having to take the long road trip yourself. So it does exist.
It'll never be a good idea, because the people driving the car into that little narrow spot, they're going to beat the hell out of your car. Like, I can tell you that right now. Like, I don't even know anything about this service. I can tell you they're beating the hell out of cars because that is a very cramped space right there. I'm sure some doors are getting smashed into the side of the train car and stuff like that because they have so many cars to load. They've got to be fast. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, maybe not the best of ideas. And also another thing is that because this is an eastern route, it doesn't really get like the best cars because of height restrictions on the bridges here in the eastern part of America. They end up having to use Viewliners, and I'll show you this here. Viewliner 2s, which are their new Viewliners. They're these. and they're a little small. They're not as nice and luxurious as the Superliner coaches that Amtrak uses on the West Coast, which are really cool. Let me show y'all a Superliner coach. Superliner Amtrak. There we go. So this is a Superliner. This is when they were first introduced into service back in the late 70s. But these things are double level. They're usually considered a lot nicer than a Viewliner. And usually a lot of people prefer them, according to what people say. So you really can't get the kind of luxury and opulence out of the auto train that you can out of any other kind of a long distance train in the Western U.S. But anyways, with that,
Could you imagine if the train was like, if it was like, for example, like the Oriental Express, or if it was like even Kim Jong-un's special train or something like that level of luxury on the train, people like around the country would be like all like focused and excited on the train again. They would be like, oh my God, like we got to go try to ride that. You would probably have the thing booked up so much that you probably couldn't get a reservation for like 6 to 7 months out.
Okay.
That's how like popular it would make it. If they just made it first class, that would change the whole outlook on trains. And once it gained some traction with like 1 or 2 train lines doing that, for Amtrak, I'm sure that other companies for profit would probably pop up, create competition, because it would be getting so many passengers.
Okay, that's a good point. And there was a train that did that in America, and it actually was successful. It was called the Super Chief. You heard me talking about this today, Matthew, because I was researching a lot. I was like, how in the world can you fix this? And I kind of came to the idea of you as like more luxurious trains. So they had something called the Super Chief, and this is what it looked like. Many people will know this train. It was the most famous train in America, and it's because it was the highest class train in the United States. The fares weren't bad either. I mean, they were actually pretty decent. But this train would take you from Chicago to Los Angeles, through the Southwest. It was really cool, and let me see if I can find you all a picture here on Wikipedia of the inside. Probably one of the more famous things about the train was the turquoise room at the back of the car. This was a private coach that was specifically made to host dinner parties. So you could have 15 people make a reservation, and while the train was en route, you could sit back here and have a dinner party, and you would be served food that was pretty much only served in a 5-star restaurant because the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad specifically partnered with a restaurant group, and I forgot what their name was. It was like Harold House or something like that. The Harvey House. Here we go. That's what it is. The Harvey House, which was a famous restaurant at the time, ended up partnering with the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, which ran this train, to have chefs from their company, from the Harvey House Company, on the train cooking the food. So all of the food that was ever served on this train for breakfast, lunch, and dinner was all considered first class, like, 3 Michelin stars kind of quality of food. And the train was
a good idea.
Yeah,
it's a good idea because that's basically what the cruise lines do, because you don't really necessarily go on a cruise for like, oh, I want to go like sit on a boat the whole time. Is once you look at the water for a day, you're pretty much done with it. But they bring in that good food though on those cruises. Like they have the best food on cruise lines for some reason, and that's to try to, I think, distract you from the fact there's hardly anything to do like on the boat. And so they bring out the good food, and everybody's like, oh, I want to go on a cruise to eat good for like however long the cruise is. And the railroad could do that too.
Yeah, I mean they could. You could market the long distance trips as like a really nice vacation, because it is, and that's actually how the Super Chief ended up being advertised towards the later end of its life. During the 60s and 70s, is that it wasn't really more of a fast way to travel because the jet had overtaken it at this point, a long distance trip like this. It was more about the luxury of the whole trip, getting to enjoy the experience of traveling from Chicago to Los Angeles, and the trip itself being kind of a part of the experience. But after a while, because, of course, at this point, Santa Fe, much like many other companies, was starting to suffer running these services because the government had completely pulled subsidies for these passenger rail services. They completely diverted the money into the airlines. They were losing money rapidly on running these passenger lines. So then Amtrak took it over. And then Amtrak ended up creating what is nowadays called the Southwest Chief, which runs the exact same route as the Super Chief, but it's not as luxurious and it's not as nice as the Super Chief was. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. We do have a large amount of questions to get to, but I hope y'all enjoyed this massive, long rabbit hole that we went into about the railroads. But anyways, with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our next one here goes to Star Rider, who puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to Star Rider for that support. That's very generous. They said, You're the coolest. Everything you discuss is so important and so knowledgeable, and I respect you both so much. Love the show, and honestly, if you talk about ladybugs, I'd listen. And thank you very much for those kind words. That's very high praise right there. I appreciate it.
That's really high praise. And I got to thank you so much for the support, Star Rider, and helping the channel to keep on running. And thank you for really enjoying everything we talk about. Sometimes I wonder if folks enjoy this stuff. Because this is actually like what I live and breathe. I talk this stuff all the time. Not really railroads, but I talk about like water quality, energy infrastructure, road infrastructure, rails, stuff like that. I love talking about this kind of stuff. It really makes me happy to talk about. I love it. And I always wonder if people are enjoying what these kinds of like rabbit holes, you know, because it's not war related. It's not Ukraine war related, but it is something that I find interesting to talk about. I'm just praying that folks in the chat, all of y'all who are watching right now, find it interesting to some sense. It honestly seems like y'all did, because usually whenever something's really uninteresting, we see a massive drop off in views. To be honest, Matthew, looking at the viewer chart, it looks like it's a pretty average decay, like of people leaving as we go through the question segment. It doesn't look like a lot of people left because of that. So it looks like a lot of y'all actually enjoyed it from what I can tell.
Are they just staying so we don't feel bad that they wanted to leave in the middle of the train segment? Could that be it?
Maybe that might be it too. But still, huge thanks to you so much once again for those kind words, because that is incredibly kind of you, and I thank you so much for enjoying that little segment and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to William Watson, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, William, for that support as well. He said, the Chinese are building a super rail system in South America. What say you? Oh, it's gonna last for what? Maybe like 5 years or something, and then the railroads are gonna flip upside down and go like bury themselves in the ground or something. Probably because that tofu drag like railroad construction or something. I don't have any faith in anything the Chinese build. They may be able to build fast and quick, and they can beat us on that front with the time frame, but it's not going to last, and they're going to have to like do a ton of maintenance on it to keep it in barely operating shape. And the Chinese just don't have it on that front. And that rail system right there, it'll be not the super rail system, but it'll be the sucking rail system. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh, that tofu drag. Oh, that carb like that it will not mean anything, because Uganda's rail network is like garbage. Like, it is horrendous. Let me go pull that up for y'all, because China actually funded pretty much the entire construction of the Ugandan rail network. And so Uganda rail network. Let's see, Uganda Railway, and then I need to go down here to the modern day, where, oh my god, this is so bad. This is actually a train that was still in use in Nairobi, Kenya in 2017. It's like, oh, that's rough. That's actually pretty rough. But let me see here if I can find, I'd be dipped. I can't find the part where they actually funded the construction. But China came in because it was really bad. But they constructed a whole new rail network for the Ugandans. But the reason why China does these things is so that way they can get a foot in the door, because it's like a shark loan for the large part. They give them this thing and they tell them they have to repay it, but the interest and the amount that they have to repay in the time frame is completely impossible. So the Chinese end up creating pretty much a debt slave of a country by doing things like this. The railroad would probably be fine for a while. It would end up deteriorating pretty quickly. But the bad thing about it is that it brings China pretty much into complete control of your country economically. And if you're not in control of your country economically, you're not in control of your country at all. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Also, by request, because Melanie16040 has been asking for this a great deal, I will pull up a Garrett locomotive. So let me go pull that up so everyone can see it, or a garrote, which is really what it's called. And let me see if I can find you a picture of one of these. Oh, these things were wacky cool. I think they were really neat, but that's what they are.
That's definitely messed up. Why does it say ear?
Because could you lend it an ear? Oh man, dude, if you put your ear on that thing though, seriously, it's so hot it would like boil it right off. But beyond that, these things were really cool. They're not used a lot in the world. America actually went for the articulated chassis instead, but these were incredibly neat. And let me see here. Here's another. South Africa had some of the most famous ones. I think all of them have been retired at this point, and maybe one of them was preserved. I'm trying to see if I can find one from Australia, though, because Australia also had some of these as well. Australasia. I've never heard of Australasia. I've heard of Australia, though. But here's an Australian Garrett right there. These things are really neat. I just think they're technologically unique because they're they're technically omnidirectional. And also they have a pretty decent amount of tractive effort, which is pretty cool about them. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, Melanie. I had to bring this up because you kept asking for it, and they are really neat. I'm actually a fan of these things, but still, I'm more a big fan of the duplex locomotives that we had in America, like the Pennsylvania Railroad duplexes, or the big boys, or the Challengers, or well, not the Challengers. What the hell were they called? No, it was the Challenger and the big boy. And then there was the Alleghenies. Those were really cool to me, but these are also incredibly unique and really special technologically as well. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Wellness LSA Latvia, who puts in a 15. And thank you very much, Wellness, for that support. Once again, they said, can you check Latvia quality of living? We've been through sheet the past 100 years. I think that was what that was supposed to mean. They said, whatever, where we are on top. But we are living best times and times right now, unless the war.
And let me see here. I'm trying to find it right now. Let's see here. Dang, let's see here. Dang, they don't really make this easy to read, do they? But we have Latvia right here on the OCED index, wilderness, and it looks as though, let's see here. Oh, see, right here, this is what I'm talking about. They actually do factor this in, apparently, to their quality of life thing. America has the best housing in the world. No one beats us because our houses are the biggest and the best. Like, that actually is just like a truth of America. People take that for granted here. Because we have the most square foot on average, or square feet on average. We usually have the most appliances and amenities within a house on average. Pretty cool stuff. Latvia is actually on down there. It's right in between Colombia and the Russian Federation. But that makes sense because it was a part of the Soviet Union. So, can't really knock it for that. Income, it's actually kind of on down there. It's near Turkey and Mexico. Who's at the top? Luxembourg. And the United States is second in that regard. Jobs?
What about jobs?
Let's see. It's sandwich. Ooh, that's a rough spot to be in between Portugal, which is currently in it's like in a long-lasting depression pretty much, and then Russia, which is also in a depression right now. So, maybe not the best for jobs, but who's at the top? Iceland. Huh. That's interesting. Well,
Where's the United States out here? Right there?
It's the fifth.
Huh. What about community? Oh, what's the criteria for that?
So Latvia is actually on up there for community. It's right next to Austria and the UK. Where is America? America is actually not that far away either. It's on down there towards Latvia. Education, it's actually down the middle. America is below Latvia in education. I would honestly not disagree with that. But let's see, who's at the top? Finland. Well, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But let's see, Australia, Sweden, Estonia, Poland. Interesting. A lot of European nations dominate this upper tier of the list. Pretty interesting. And then let's see, below that.
The health sucks in Latvia from the looks of it.
Let's see. Ooh, yeah, that's pretty rough. Environment. Well, how in the world do they factor the environment side of things? I'm interested in that. America's really on up there, apparently. Let's see. Civic engagement. Australia is number one. Where's America? America is right below the UK, but not by much. Latvia's on down there. It's near the South Africa and Costa Rica. Health is really rough. Latvia is behind Lithuania, Korea, Hungary, Japan. Japan is really low. Huh.
That's weird.
Poland, Portugal, Brazil, Slovakia, Czechia, Chile, Turkey, Germany. Where's America? Dang, we're on up there, apparently.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how they're coming up with these rankings and stuff, but it just seems like somebody subjectively sat down and said, oh, we'll give them an 8.6.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like to me, because, on some things, for example, education, I feel like I'm a little biased, but I'd kind of knock it down a couple of notches. I don't know what they're using to come up with this stuff, but Latvia it does look like it's on the way up, though, in some aspects, especially on education, for sure, which is a really important one, because education is a good foundation and groundwork to improve the rest of them over time. So that's pretty interesting.
Well, life satisfaction though. Like, how do you measure life satisfaction?
Yeah, it's like these are like qualitative things that are like a person to person thing. I don't know how you get like a discernible national figure for that.
Who's living the best? Who's got it the best of on this life satisfaction?
Finland.
Oh, come on. Now, okay. And now, I'm not going to get into politics here, but I think there's a little bit of something behind the rankings here. I'm not buying it.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. You know, like with work-life balance, you know, like it says Italy's number one. It's like, well, how, you know, it's like, I don't know how. To be honest, I really don't know how. It's like, where in the world is America? I'm sure America's way down the list. Let's see. Well, where the hell are we on this list? Were we even... There we are. The United States at 5.2. Like, for us, I personally say that's true, but for others, it's like, if you're working a 40-hour work week, you actually have a pretty decent amount of free time, at least compared to what we have. You know, we work like 60 and 70 hours a week, so, you know, it's like, I don't know. I feel like, you know, working a 40-hour work week, there would be a lot of work-life balance, but I don't know.
Real quick, go to the bottom of the work-life balance. Who's at the bottom of that one?
Work-life balance. The bottom is Mexico.
I'm looking for China. Like, where's China at?
Let's
see.
China isn't even on the list.
Well, at least that's fair. They didn't make the chart. Now they're probably off the bottom of the chart.
Dude, they're
what
probably
about
negative.
life satisfaction?
What
about life satisfaction? You see China on that chart?
Let's see here. Dude, Turkey's at 0. Turkey's at flat 0.
Man, they're just like barely hanging on right now.
Dude, you go down to Turkey, you go, hey, how are you doing? I hate it here. It's like, okay. It's like, all right. It looks like they kind of put the same countries on the list over and over and over, and they didn't include China on any of them.
Man, China didn't even register with this one.
Yeah,
let's see. I
but
want to see one more. I'm just curious.
I'm
just curious. Up here at the top, scroll up again. Let's see here. Let's see. Did they put China on the community chart?
Huh, I wonder. All right, we're moving on through.
Nope, China doesn't have any community either.
Huh.
They're fresh out.
Yeah, they're fresh out. They're fresh out of community. No education, no environment, no health, nothing. They just don't even register. But let's see. They actually explain how they came up with this stuff. Let's see. Let's see. Formal process, developing laws. Let's see. Become in Latvia the level of stakeholder engagement, developing. So they register civic engagement by voter turnout, gender inequality, and that's it. But, you know, like, but the thing here with this, like, and this is the thing I don't get. It's like voter turnout and gender inequality, I don't really think that determines a lot on civic engagement. You know, like, I just, for some reason to me, it doesn't really seem like those two things add up to create civic engagement. So what do they factor in for community? What the hell is this? Like, what's the top one? They don't even... Quality of support network.
That's totally scientific right there.
Yeah,
the quality of support network.
And also, this is a qualitative thing, again, because it says people who believe they can rely on their friends. It's like, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, maybe people just feel good in this country and they just think they can rely on their friends, but they really can't. It's like, this is a very qualitative assessment of community, you know? Like, it's like, I don't really know how in the world we're supposed to be getting, or what we're supposed to be getting out of this. You know, and then once again, let's see. And also, it doesn't even explain how this one's come up with. And then social inequality, it doesn't explain how it came to this either. You know,
that's like word soup on that description right there. I was trying to make sense of it. I was reading. I'm like, that ain't say anything really. Just like it's speaking in circles.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how they're qualifying any of this, you know, and I feel like if you were qualifying this well and it actually made sense, you would explain it on these information dots instead of just really, like, giving the buzzword soup on each of them to answer them, you know? Like, that's my take on this. And that's why I don't really like these graphs, because it's like, you know, how in the world is this true? I mean, like, what if, for example, I don't know, What if Belgium has like the best quality of life in the world overall? I mean, and also it's subjective. Because it's like, what if some people, like for example, like let's say Matthew's an introvert, and he doesn't really care about having to deal with other people or having a sense of community. I mean, hell, a country like the Netherlands would be great for him because they're known for not really having that much to do with much other people. But on the other hand, I'm an extrovert. The Netherlands would be hell for me. I'd hate it there. And so it's like that's a very qualitative kind of a thing to assess the standard of living in a country off of something like that, because some people might love it, some people might hate it. Like I don't know how they're really coming up with this. Is really what I'm trying to
Let's
say.
see. Which country was that again?
This is Latvia that we're looking at right here.
And that was the one for the introverts.
No, the Netherlands.
Oh, let's see. Flights to the Netherlands.
Matthew, maybe
I'm joking, by the way. I'm joking.
If y'all don't know, Matthew actually is more introverted, and I'm more extroverted. So it's two competing kind of mindsets when we think of how to go about dealing with people. We have like completely different ways of approaching it. Not to say one's wrong or the other. It's just different ways of doing things. But still, pretty neat. Also, I got to give a huge credit to Matthew for that, because of that, he is able to spot things in folks a lot better than I am sometimes, way better than I can. And I'm really late to the party on some things. You know exactly what I'm talking about with that, Matthew.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
It's just it balances out. It balances out pretty good. I think it's why we work well together, because the enforcer's super outgoing. He's the one who pleases the crowds the most. And meanwhile, we have to keep the business running in the background, so someone's got to tend to that stuff. So then I'm here as well. So it works out.
Yeah. Also, I saw Steve Wilson say, I think about the scorings. This is starting to feel like it's politically motivated. That's what I'm saying about these kinds of things. Like, like if for some reason this survey group has a political bias, so you can put that into play in collecting these figures, because it's not really quantitative, it's more so qualitative. And because it's qualitative, there's a lot of fudging that you can do, and also because of that, there's a lot of different ways you can measure these factors to come to different conclusions. And that's why I don't really like these kinds of graphs, because they can have a political spin one way or another. I don't really feel like they're that accurate. But beyond that, I will say this, Will, and I'll say Latvia. Latvia is way better off now than it ever has been, and it is great to know that the entirety of the Baltics, not just Latvia, is really on the up and up and improving massively these days compared to what it used to be. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Mr. Shroom Kid, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Shroom Kid, for that support. They said, Russia says by 2030, they'll have a framework to establish working with young people, educate and raise new generations to be patriotic. They said, let's hope they educate how Ukraine helped them in World War II, GDP-wise.
And Mr. Shroom Kid, I doubt it. Understanding that correctly, they're probably going to start demonizing the entirety of the Western world and say that we're going to use evil space lasers to obliterate all of them or something like that. It's not going to be good education, that's for sure. I'm all for a country promoting patriotism and really wanting people to love their country and really appreciate it for what it is. But I'm not into the idea of really like brainwashing people. Like, like with America, I'm fine with like the American public education system saying America is a great country that every American citizen should really adore. Like, I'm fine with that. But at the same time, I don't think we should brainwash people to think everything's perfect over here. We should also say, but, of course, like every generation, there are problems that the nation is going to face, and we have to find a way to fix these problems, like this problem. And, there's two different groups who say that there's two different ways to fix this problem. Here's one way and here's the other, and you could do stuff like that. I'm into that kind of a thing, but I'm not into what Russia does, which is truly brainwashing people, which is not so much of a good thing. And when I say that, I mean, they'll say something like, Russia is the best country in the world. Nothing is wrong with Russia. And it's like, there's a lot wrong with Russia, but they won't tell you that. And they won't tell you that there should, like, the next generation should come forward and try and fix these problems. They don't say that kind of stuff. They just say it's perfect, period. And, with America, I say it's a great country. I love this country. But of course, like there must be things that have to be fixed. And we have to find out how to get about to fixing them. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat, this one's going to go to William Watson once again. He throws in another $20 donation, and we appreciate it very much, William, the second support of the night. He said, thanks for taking my question. And he said, have a coffee on me, and thanks for all you guys do.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, William Watson, and thank you for enjoying us taking your question. No problem at all. We're more than happy to answer questions and get to talk to everyone. It's an incredibly fun time here at the end of the stream. And thank you so much for enjoying everything we do, and thank you so much for supporting it and helping it to continue to be possible. So a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here is going to go to, let's see here. It's going to go to Vlogger, who puts in a $10 donation. And it says, is the nuclear power plant still on fire? Oh, no, it's definitely out. You're talking about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, I'm assuming?
Oh, yeah, that one's out. That one's been out for a good bit. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one right here, let's see here. I saw someone in the live chat say, let's just acknowledge these guys work well together, and that's really great. We're actually brothers. I don't think that fella knew that we're actually brothers. He said, I think it's a great working friendship. Yes, it's been a very good working friendship for 24 years now, at least for me. Well, actually 23 because I'm a year older, so so 23. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, we have a $10 super chat from Darren Quinn, who said, the only thing popping off in Belarus, or Ruski, is in their pants.
Oh, dang. Well, I thank you for support, Darren Quinn. And I don't think I even need to add a comment to that one. That's a standalone right there. But still, thank you so much for supporting helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to the Roadrunner, Meep Meep, who puts in a $10 donation and says, longer drums, please, in the opening monologue.
And thank you so much for the support, Roadrunner. I would do that, but those audio files, we really can't modify them too much. But still, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Very nice suggestion, though. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kid Rock 966, who puts in a 10 and says, I hope you guys have a good vacation and y'all have more than earned it. LLT, LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, Kid Rock 966. And thank you so much once again for wanting us to have a good vacation. We're going to have a great one. To be honest, Kid Rock, it couldn't come sooner. Matthew and me are honestly burnt out at this point, and we are just kind of puttering our way up to that point. By the way, I got to tell you all the times again, just so that way you all know, spread the word, because I'm going to give you all these dates here that are upcoming that we will not be running streams on. There will be no streams for these following days: September 14th, September 15th, September 16th, September 17th, and September 18th. We plan on being able to run a stream on September 19th. But we're not entirely sure about that. We'll have to see if that it can actually happen, but it should be able to happen. So with that, I hope that does lay that out there for everyone. So spread the word. Those are the days that we will not be running a stream, is the 14th to the 18th. Maybe even we'll expand over into the 19th, but we're fairly certain we can run a stream on the 19th. So just putting that out there for everyone. There will be no streams during that time. Do not fret. The Enforcer will be back. It's just that we are going to be taking a short intermission. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next. Also, someone said, what the hell? These guys, you're 23? Actually, technically, I'm 22. Excuse you. And Matthew's 24. Yes, we are quite young. If you think that we talk with a lot of experience, that's just because we read a lot. Well, I read a lot, and then Matthew watches a lot of video documentaries, which is also a really good way to learn about stuff. Like, I would actually say that most of that's pretty informational, incredibly informational, because it's really all the information in its fine detail, but condensed into an understandable form. So I would say that that's actually a really good way to understand the stuff as well.
Well, see, unfortunately, you made an assumption there, a very dangerous assumption. He said, you guys are 23? He could mean, I thought you guys were 15. He didn't say that he thought we were old or anything.
Oh, that's true. You're right. I mean, that's true. Interesting. But with that,
I'm joking, by the way. He meant the other thing. He said, I salute you guys in the live chat.
Oh, and also, thank you so much for saluting us. We'll hopefully have a very fun time. But, nevertheless, yes, we are only 22 and 24. So if you ever think that we talk with a lot of experience and we sound like we have a lot of years behind us, it was just a really, really stern upbringing that brought our lives to this. Got to give a huge shout out to my parents, though. If it wasn't for them and the way they raised us, with all of the good and bad that came with that, we wouldn't be who we are today. So big shout out to them. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one right here goes to Davo LBC, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Davo. They said, Davo! Yeah, I said it right that time. He said, so you want clean water, edible food, and breathable air, you damn commies? I know, right? What a commie. What a commie. Those damn commies, I'll tell you what. Who wants that clean water and stuff like that? Because someone told you, if you want clean water, you're a bastard. And everybody said, that's right. They are bastards for wanting clean water. And they didn't not for 1 second to think, wait a minute, I want clean water too. They just thought, I'm mad, I'm angry, I want to hate somebody, so I'm going to hate them. I was told to hate them, so I'm going to do it.
That's really how it goes. And also another thing is that people will go, oh, I want clean drinking water. And then the people they elected, they'll find out, like in Michigan, for example, because I remember this, Matthew. I remember this clear as day, and this is how it would go anywhere. Michigan is run by a certain group, all right? This would go the same way for both groups. But the water in Flint had massive amounts of lead contamination. And so then they go, well, I mean, hell, they didn't know? The pipes were installed way back when. It's like, well, yeah, they should have known. The pipes were installed way back then. It's like they should have been replaced. It's like, that's stupid. And then, of course, the blame was diverted. Same would go for Alabama. Like, a lot of people are thinking that I'm taking a shot at a certain group there. No. It would go the same for Alabama, because if we were able to find out that there was lead in the water in Birmingham, which there isn't from what we understand, but if it ever was found out that that was the case, people would be going down here in Alabama, but they didn't know. The pipes were old. It's like, that's why there's a problem. The pipes were old. They weren't even supposed to be here anymore. They were supposed to be replaced. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know this. You got to be an idiot to not want to replace old pipes. There's just a modicum of maintenance that goes on in daily life for everything. It's stupid to think that you wouldn't have to maintain the pipes. Like, that's the thing to me. But people will divert, because when it's their political party that's under the gun, oh my goodness, we can't let them take this shattering embarrassment. I mean, hell, think about all these people's reputations who are on the line. Forget about all the people who may have their lives permanently changed from lead poisoning and whatnot. It's really about these politicians' reputations. We can't have that tarnished. We're going to have to brush this one under the rug. Well, kind of like how Flint ended up. Because Flint was a big deal for a little bit, and then it just got swept aside right under the rug. Kind of like how the whole East Palestine thing got swept under the rug really quickly about the failing railroad infrastructure in this country and how we're letting a lot of these companies get away with it. And then both sides went, ooh, that's a bad look, because we shut down those railroad workers that were striking over the poor safety conditions of the railroads. Let's just sweep that under the rug and just forget about that. Because it's not good to bring up those unpleasantries, because really both sides were to blame for that. And so everyone just went, ooh, let's just skip that and just move on along and forget that happened. But anyways.
Also, y'all remember that cargo ship that tapped that bridge and knocked the whole thing down? Do y'all remember that a while back? Like, I haven't heard anything about that since. Like, is the bridge, like, being fixed? Is it being replaced or what? It's like the thing tapped it, it knocked the whole thing down, and all of a sudden I didn't hear anything else about it. It's like, what happened?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the update is on that. Are they rebuilding the Francis Scott Key Bridge? Are they not? I don't know. It was very important for the city. I would think that they would have to, but I haven't even heard anything about funding for that. Also, Oscar,
it was just a love tap. It was just a love tap by the boat. They just barely like dinged it or something. His whole thing comes down. It's like, damn. It's like, was the bridge really that fragile?
Yeah, it's like, well, the bridges aren't supposed to be hit from the sides. You know what I mean? Like, it's like they aren't ever supposed to be.
It's not supposed to, but it seems like it'd take a little tap.
Nah, man, you would believe it or not, a bridge getting hit like that, it's always guaranteed to go down, crazily enough.
They ought to build them stronger.
They ought to build a giant, pretty much like a small island around the major support columns like that, so that way if a ship was to start heading towards them, they really run aground instead of hitting the columns. Like, I feel like that would be a bit of a better end result, but that might cost more money, and God forbid that safety is prioritized over the costs. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Also, I saw someone in the chat say, nope, that's another party too. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Everyone does that. That's why I'm not a big fan of it. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and we have to speed up just a little bit because we have some more super chats to get to. And this one goes to V Lucky Luck V, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much. They said, greetings from Germany, Deutschland. They said from the beautiful Black Forest. It's 4 a.m. here, and I just got up to watch your stream.
Dang, from the Black Forest. Let me go Google that. Black Forest, Germany. There we go. Well, am I stupid or something? It was literally like I was like, it's a giant forest right here, and I looked at that and I was like, that's got to be the Black Forest, right? And it is. But it's really pretty out there in the Black Forest. I mean, look at this place. It's gorgeous. It's nice. It's worth a visit one day. You know, I just never really realized Germany has so many beautiful, picturesque, scenic areas. Like, I've almost always, believe it or not, Lucky, I've always dunked on Germany because I always thought that the entire place was wrecked from World War II and they rebuilt it in a modernist style everywhere. But I'm really digging this. This is gorgeous. We'll have to go here one day for sure. And I thank you so much for being someone who watches our channel all the way from the Black Forest in Germany, right near to the French border. And I hope that you've been enjoying the stream today. And that was absolutely beautiful. And we will have to take a trip to Germany one day because that is one hell of a beautiful looking spot right there. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Sean Heaton, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Sean, for that support as well. He said, the best commander is the one who wins without the fighting. But that doesn't count for the Akhmat group. That's the worst commander ever. He went on the billboard down in Legend for saying that on the billboard. He lost, though. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support. And that's actually a quote by Sun Tzu. It's a real one. But the actual meaning behind the quote is that the pen is more powerful than the sword. That's really what Sun Tzu was getting at with that, is that it's better to try and find a way to resolve the situation without war instead of getting involved in one. That was really what he was going for. But in Kursk, it seems to have taken a different meaning. It means run away from the battlefield, completely forget about what's going on up there, and just act like there's no war going on at all. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sir Real User 9, who puts in a 5 and says, Spike must have missed the cutoff last night. He didn't, though. We read that one off. He said, so again, he says, hello, and LSA for victory.
An LSA for victory. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And hello to you, and LSA to victory. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Kevin Richter, who puts in a 5, or Richter, I think. He said the Bulgarian and Hungarian armies both had the Samua S-35 tanks, and they most likely got it from one of them.
Maybe so, Kevin. But if I remember correctly, Hungary actually had their own tanks, and they were the Turan 3s, another form of Turans that they had. Let me show one of these to y'all, because I'm sure many people have never even heard of the Turan. It's the Hungarian version. Well, this is the best way to explain it, although it's not a direct comparison. It's the Hungarian version of the Panzer IV. Really ugly things. I don't really think they look that good, but it was Hungary's tank. They didn't make a lot of them, though. But still, thank you for the support. I don't know about them having Sumas, but I would bet they did, and I'll have to look into that a little bit more, Kevin. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Nasty Clark, who's back once again. It's good to see Nasty Clark. It's been a while. He said ducks, cow. Where's the Bamuba guy? Oh, we had Duncan. He was in here just a moment ago. He was at the top up there. He said cheers as well and have a nice day and take a live chat question.
And thank you so much for the support. We will have a nice day, and we will make sure to also get a live chat question as well, Nasty Clark. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
So this live chat goes to AF Kaplan, who says, regarding the crashed Ukrainian F-16, is it known if the pilot survived the incident?
The pilot did not survive the incident. He did, in fact, die in the crash. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat well. Thank you once again for supporting helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Steve Alexander, who puts in a 5. He says, humor time. Pick a director and say a story they would make a movie about the Ukraine war. And he said, I'll go first. He said, Michael Bay. What plot? All explosions.
Oh, man, if I had to come up with one, oh, man, let me think. It would be J.J. Abrams. He would probably make the movie about, let me think here. about the Battle of Kyiv at the very beginning of the war, and it'd probably be nothing but friggin' lens flares. You'd go blind by the time it was over. You wouldn't be able to see. You would literally be walking away from the screen like you're some kind of a survivor of a freaking nuclear blast. You'd be blind. But still, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Doomsday Games, who puts in a 5. He said, sorry, I had a night out, a little drunk, no biggie. I'm glad to hear it's no biggie. He said, but is there a general summary that you can give on how did they win?
It went pretty well. The Ukrainians are still holding down their areas in Kursk. They're fighting against the Russians near Pokrovsk. Beyond that, the Russians ended up getting hit pretty badly. The Belarusians chickened out, at least on their public statements, from invading Ukraine. So that's about the best summary I can give. No biggie, though. No biggie. But still, thank you for the support, Doomsday Games, and helping this channel to keep on running. It's folks like you who make this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sean Heaton. Once again, he puts in a 2 and says, smash that like button for the LSA and let's go.
And let's go, baby! And thank you so much for the support, Sean Heaton. And everyone, please smack that like button. We've gotten up to 3,400 likes. That's pretty freaking nice. And I thank everyone for hitting the like button. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment once again, who puts in a 2. And says, like button, that's an order.
And legend, and please do smack the like button once again. That is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figment, the legend. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mr. Shroom Kid, who puts in a 2 once again. He said, those tanks will have to be taken out for war.
And yeah, the ones in Patriot Park, they probably will take them out for war eventually. They'll drop them off in the trenches out there in that place. But with that, I hope that does address that well. I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a $2 donation. And thank you for bearing with us, Andrew Honeycutt. He had some problems tonight with the super chat, and it did the usual thing that it does to many people, and for some reason, it did not go through, but it charged him. So the way I've heard it works, Andrew, and also don't take this at face value because it's just what I've heard. If it does that, then most of the time, YouTube will give the money back to your card if it does not go through like that, and it usually takes a couple of days. But don't take me at my word on that, but that's what I've heard. But he said, Marmot says YouTube is not playing fair.
And it is probably true. Like, to be honest with you, can't say too much on it because we're on their platform, but it's probably true. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, thank you for being in the live chat all night tonight. I've seen you down there, and I've appreciated you. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the last super chat of the night, and then we're going to be moving on into the live chats.
And this one is going to go to Dean London, who puts in a $1 donation. And thank you very much, Dean London, for supporting the channel as well. So with that, we are now fresh out of Super Chats. And once again, huge thanks to everybody who has donated to the channel tonight and helping to keep us running. And also, real quick, I saw you're taking my life say. You remember the biggie bags in Detroit and the hood reviews?
Yeah!
I do remember that. I always remember that. I actually found out that's a real Wendy's thing. That wasn't something unique to Detroit or anything like that. The biggie bag is actually a real thing. I saw it on the billboard on our local Wendy's. And I was like, no way. Like, a biggie bag made it down to Birmingham. I'm like, really? But we actually have it too. But anyways, moving on from this, we're moving into our live chat segment. And tonight we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. We had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, and her royal fluffiness. And they said that the Morse code says the Russians just cannot figure out ... see what's going on. And now Belarus chicken out, LOL, and LLT, LSA.
And that was the sound of money, and y'all got the dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all massively, greatly, as a matter of fact, for getting that correct. That's really impressive of y'all, and I also have to say that that is just incredible that y'all have gotten that correct for the 918th day of the war. We missed y'all last night, we did, but nevertheless, y'all are still getting it correct every single day. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Bruce Lee, who says, have you heard that the Dutch are giving Ukraine permission to use F-16s in Russia?
I did not hear that, and if the American handlers say no, that will immediately be reversed because we sold those F-16s to the Netherlands. So while they're saying that, if we say no, it's going to be a no. But that is still neat to hear. But with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to David Tablet, who says, could the presence of Wagner be having an influence on Lukashenko's position about invading?
Possibly. Honestly, I would feel like the Wagner would be really helping Lukashenko have assuredness in invading Ukraine because they're an outside group, so they kind of operate almost like a modern day Varangian guard. They really have no allegiance to anyone in the country, so they're going to stand with who's paying them, which would probably be Lukashenko and the central government, not the military. So I would have a feeling, if anything, it would actually be motivating him to try and invade Ukraine because he can fall back on the Wagner, at least in a government coup attempt of a sort to protect him. But with that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to Pulaski, who says, do you think that France would enter Ukraine if Belarus went and invaded Ukraine?
Can you reread that one again?
They said, do you think that France would enter Ukraine if Belarus invaded Ukraine?
Do I think that France would enter Ukraine if Belarus invaded? If anyone would, they have the highest likelihood. But I'm not really sure how high that likelihood really is either. Because while it is the highest, we're talking maybe less than a 50% chance, meaning that they're still leaning towards no, but they're closer to saying yes than anyone else, if that makes sense. That sounds like a really political way to answer that. What I would generally say, I'm trying to figure out a non-political, more direct way to answer this one. What I would generally say is if I had faith that anyone would intervene, it's France, but my faith in that still isn't really that high. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in the best, most direct wordage I have. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream, and boy howdy, what a stream it has been. I'm going to thank everyone so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover this news for each and every single one of y'all tonight. If y'all did enjoy, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to see it. It makes us very happy to know that people really do enjoy this thing, because we run this thing 6 days a week, every day but Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, and long live the Least Spring Army, and the Least Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. It's been a long-lasting stream. And thank you all for tuning in tonight and listening once again. And thank you all for hitting the like button. We've gotten up to 3,500 likes tonight, and we love to see it. And with that, we'll see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next night of war news on the stream, that is. And also maybe midday tomorrow as well for a video if there's enough news to cover. But with that, thank you all once again. Slava Ukraine. Herom Slava. Get some rest, and good night.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
І